we got the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates removed in Maharashtra legally.
Legally removed.
Yes. The judge in court, he criticized the government for lying and deceiving people. Very well documented, published phenomenon in the literature, wherein when the brain is clinically dead or in coma, what is going on outside? The soul actually is watching and observing those things, and it can come back even, when he was clinically dead. So many of the byproducts, the metabolites of these good bacteria in our gut, they are extremely important for mental health. A lot of the most people don't know this, but most of the serotonin and dopamine is actually made in your gut, and then it's transported to the brain, and other parts of the body. A smoker who has a high omega-3 index has the same level of mortality as a non-smoker who has a low omega-3 index. Omega-3s can literally offset a lot of the damage which is caused by smoking and give you the same life expectancy as someone who's not smoking but has a low index. But ideally, of course, you want to not smoke and have a high index. That's what puts you in the best category.
सबसे पहले तो मैं बोलना चाहता हूँ, I can't believe मैंने सिर्फ तेरी लाइव स्ट्रीम्स देखी हैं इस रूम में से, जहाँ तूने कई तरह के केसेस फाइट करे हैं बड़े बड़े जायंट्स के खिलाफ. To sit in this room and to be around these books is an honor.
Thank you, sir.
It's the most unique reading list I've ever seen, and I've been to many libraries जहाँ पे लोग बहुत ज़्यादा esoteric German किताबें पढ़ के बोलते हैं कि हमने कुछ करा है, but like just god damn it, bro.
No, man, this is like 5 to 6 years of just hardcore rapid curation of different kinds of materials about things I've always been curious about since college. So everything from like extraterrestrial life, metaphysics, past life research, conspiracies, economics, like political science, libertarianism, the whole gambit, like, and of course like health and everything.
इसमें क्या है? Robots Rebellion, David Icke. I know तेरे को पसंद है David Icke.
David Icke used to be one of my favorite authors. Actually, I've read all of his books, like वो section में जो भी देख रहे हो. So I've read like 5-10% of this room, to be honest, but my goal is to read it throughout life. But David Icke actually inspired me to get into conspiracy research and metaphysics and spirituality.
But what's this book? पढ़ी है ये वाली तूने, Robots Rebellion?
It's actually one of his very older books where he just introduces some of the themes that he expanded upon in his later work. So in this book, he basically talks about the broad idea that we are controlled by a ruling class, and the machinations surrounding the bankers who run a lot of, like, the central banks, and a lot of the clout that the Rothschilds and people like that have. He broke some of those ideas in that book earlier, and then he expanded on it with later books, going deeper into secret societies and the exact families and the structure of the Illuminati, like how they exactly run different corporations and governments and different agencies like the CIA and stuff. So yeah, that's one of his very early books, but the later books actually blew my mind quite a bit as they helped me to understand the nature of reality and who's really running the world as well.
मैंने एक किताब खरीदी टाइडल वेव से बांद्रा में. It's called The War on Cash. Something I've been thinking about a lot, because जितने ज़्यादा Bitcoin, Maximalism और क्रिप्टो वगैरह आ रहा है ना, उसके साथ I also suspect that मेरा जो कैश है, मेरे जो पैसे हैं किसी एक इंस्टीट्यूशन के पास, बैंक टेलर से लेके CEO तक सबको पता है इस इंसान के इतने पैसे हैं. And so like I will liberally buy an HDFC bank or an ICICI bank stock to make money. But something about that just doesn't sit right with me. And I'm sure you're also in the world of crypto yourself. How would you think about that?
So I think we kind of touched on this in the last podcast a bit, but there has been a drive to eliminate cash and ban cash. And this has been driven by the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, the Gates Foundation. Like all these people have been driving this push.
So why are all these techno entrepreneurs helming this? Because it seems like it's a very rebellious move कि ये लोग anti-establishment जा रहे हैं.
You mean the entire crypto and Bitcoin side of things? Yeah. So there's a couple of things about that. I feel like this is a Goldilocks honeymoon phase for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Because if you read the white papers from the World Economic Forum and what they're actually discussing and planning in terms of, simulations and events they're anticipating, there's tons of white papers where they're anticipating large-scale cyber attacks, and in the aftermath of that, they do want to clamp down on cryptocurrencies. So there's this idea about false flag attacks wherein the people in power actually stage attacks secretly through their networks and then blame a boogeyman who they want to demonize.
A scapegoat, yeah.
And then they used that event and the outcry from the event to kind of crack down on that. Something similar I anticipate happening with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies based on my research. So I expect, based on my readings of the globalists and their plans and stuff and their writings, that there will be a cyber event, like a massive cyber event, which will be blamed on a rogue state that they want to go after, like Russia, China, Iran now, or they will blame it on like these Bitcoiners who then demand Bitcoin as ransom in order for people to get access back to their devices, and that can be used as an event to crack down on Bitcoin. Like, I mean, if you just go back pre-lockdown, I was telling people that there's going to be this large scale pandemic and they're going to do vaccine mandates and lockdowns, and that time people had a very hard time believing it because they're like, oh, how will they get the entire of India to like stay at home and shut down?
And they did.
But whenever the fear element is there and the justification and the boogeyman is hyped up in the public, that's when it's easy to socially engineer people and make them do what you want them to do. So it's the fear that makes people easily suggestible. And there are the people in power who also have like deep research in psychology. They know how to manipulate the public mind. Like one of the key luminaries who guided a lot of globalists in terms of propaganda is Edward Bernays. He was a nephew of Sigmund Freud. And
the
guy
father
who
of
wrote
spin.
the book,
Father of spin.
Father of Spin. Yeah. So he had a famous quote from one of his books, Propaganda, where he talks about like the minds of men are largely molded by people we've never heard about, and so there's always like this inner ruling class which is driving.
I have a few things to say on. So I actually read him in this class in college called Policy and Public Opinion, right? And I loved his stuff. उस time पे जब आप नई advertising अंदर जा रहे हो, तो you think any Tom, Dick and Harry that can spin up campaigns to get women to smoke is a smart guy, right? You eventually learn about his life and how he ended up like bitter and like unhappy on his deathbed. But I don't think Max to Max he was in cahoots with the tobacco companies. उससे ज़्यादा I don't think he was necessarily conjuring up globalists or thinking about like the ruling elite so much.
The reason I brought him up as a reference is because his book actually talks about how there are people in power who mold public opinion secretly. That's the only reference of which I used of him. Otherwise, I haven't like delved deeper into his work or writings to comment on him specifically.
No, he popularized सुबह bacon खाना सही बात है. That's why you have the standard American breakfast जहाँ पे लोग bacon खाते हैं सुबह.
Got it, but that's one example of how they use the power of propaganda and spin to push people to do one certain outcome. But the same kind of manipulation tactics and mindset, like psychological warfare, has been employed after the wake of 9/11, after the entire coronavirus situation happened. A lot of those same principles have been applied to like control people through fear, basically, because it's when the reptilian brain gets activated, the amygdala in the brain. That's when your blood flows away from your neocortex, which helps you to think, and moves to the extremities. So literally, like when people are put in fear, artificial or legitimate, people stop thinking critically, and that's when people in power have the most chance to actually seize the opportunity and mold people's minds, like make them more suggestible to do something, which is why we saw like the entire way in which people have behaved during the coronavirus, like the lockdowns, the mandates. People kind of turned against each other. It turned into a kind of Stasi state. People are like snitching on each other and stuff, and like a lot of people develop Stockholm syndrome as well, where they kind of have this positive attitude towards the oppressors, which is exactly what we saw during COVID. These are some of the psychological things that
I remember. I got beaten up by the police because I was walking around the park. So
I've got slapped by the cops for like we were doing this one pamphlet distribution thing where I was going around Worli and talking to people at the Seaface about the vaccines and the mandates and lockdowns and stuff, and the details about the virus and why it's not so deadly as made out to be. And we ran into a situation with the cops, went to the police station, we all got whacked, over there. So yeah, faced that as well.
मेहनत तो बहुत करी है. Always spreading the cause. One incident, in fact, that made me think of you. Or उस time पे I think I was traveling from Delhi to Bombay for a few podcasts. I don't remember how or where. बीच में एक बहुत ही annoying बच्चा बैठा है, majorly annoying, जो चेंचे करता रहता है. Side में we've got this like semi-cute 40-year-old sitting, right? So he's just recently become an extrovert, तो बहुत ज़्यादा बातें कर रहा है. He saw कि मैं बिल्कुल भी उसे interest से बात नहीं कर रहा, because 2 घंटे की flight है, मैं क्या introduction दूँ, क्या बात करूँ? You're just fed up with that. You don't want to do it. You just want to be in your space, chill. So he started talking to her, and I just pause my earphones to listen in, snoop in क्या चल रहा है. This woman eventually says she works for the Bill Gates Foundation. Interesting. और बातें करते. Then she says I also work in vaccine compliance. मेरे में आवाज आया, मैंने कहा Yohan, फ्लाइट में था. Then I forgot to make a note. मैंने कहा ओहो, vaccine compliance division. So I got very intrigued. Of course, by the time the flight landed, it was in my head. मैंने कहा yeah, these people are amongst us, and they might think it's very very innocuous or innocent to do this. But एक पूरी division, hypothetically, consultants की अगर vaccine compliance में काम कर रही है, तो वो where do the roots go till? क्या वो police तक जाती है? Does it extend beyond? Does it extend into influencers? And even now, like you see, weirdly enough, some policemen still wear masks. What are they saying? Are they sick of air pollution?
That's the narrative that came up, that it also help us against air pollution. But speaking to what you mentioned specifically, during my court cases, I did a lot of in-depth research on the entire government and the vaccine manufacturers, like the lobbying and how the vaccine manufacturer and the pharmaceutical industry has basically like encroached its way into our government and various aspects of the government. So there was this entire policy document which was drafted by the Gates Foundation, which addressed how to tackle vaccine hesitancy and how to basically like
Sorry, that was the
whenever
word. Vaccine hesitancy was the word. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So whenever, they had like detailed description of whenever someone gets an adverse event from the vaccine, how are the stakeholders and the government people and all of the people who are involved in pushing the vaccine supposed to respond? How are they going to rope the media in? How are they going to approach the influencers and get them on board to interview experts and stuff who all toe the party line? So these are all extremely well thought out things which are designed by the Gates Foundation, and then they have been picked up by the government, and that whole thing has been implemented. So whatever we've seen in terms of the ringtones, like Amitabh Bachchan and all of that whole like wide scale push, the radio jingles, all of that has actually been the brainchild of the Gates Foundation. They came up with all of this. They even came up with plans for how to get the government bureaucrats and like Modi involved as well, to kind of serve the entire narrative and make it easier. So the whole thing was directed around centering vaccine hesitancy, which is a smear word which is used against people who are skeptical about, like getting jabbed about different things, but mainly we talk about the COVID vaccines here. So if you're against vaccine hesitancy, you're basically saying that it's heretical to question vaccines at all, especially a vaccine which is like launched in record time and limited trials and all of that. So basically, when people use that smear word, they're saying that it's entirely safe, it's entirely effective, and there could be no possible problem. So if you are hesitant for the vaccine for any reason, it has to be wrong. Like the term itself has the presupposition that there's never a legitimate place to be skeptical about vaccines, which is absolutely a fraudulent argument, because there's like now we know there's tons of published literature showing increase in myocarditis. Some of these things have got mainstream in the last couple of months as well, where it's been covered by the mainstream media. Some of the recent studies.
Long COVID is something people are suffering from a lot.
Yeah, and the thing is that you can't really tease out if it's long COVID or it's like vaccine adverse events, because the mechanisms are largely the same. So like I've researched people who published on this in medical journals. And one of the main mechanisms for damage from the COVID virus itself is thought to be the spike protein. And the spike protein. Like there's a protein on top of the virus which locks into the ACE receptor, which is how the virus kind of entered those cells and started the like inflammatory cascade and the viral replication. So that same thing is present with the vaccines, because the vaccines are based on mRNA and viral vector platforms, wherein they literally took the spike, either the DNA of the spike or the actual spike itself. In the AstraZeneca vaccine, they took the spike, they loaded it onto an adenovirus from a chimpanzee, and then that's what was used to get the spike inside your cells and program your cells to make the spike protein yourself. The difference with traditional vaccines and these vaccines were that these vaccines actually made your body's cell machinery make the protein of the virus, and then the immune system responded. But that was all theoretical, and the trials were very like short duration. So also they were run on limited number of people. So when this thing got rolled out to billions, that's when we started seeing through the databases that capture. It's called phase 4 marketing surveillance data. So any compound that has to be launched in science has to go through clinical trials. And then after that also, it's never assumed that the compound is safe, because something can be safe and effective in a short-term clinical trial for a couple of months on a small number of people. But when you're rolling that thing out to billions, like a side effect, let's say for example, a side effect rate is 1 in 50,000. Your trial only had 5,000 people. How are you going to pick that up? Right? It's not possible. So it's only when things get rolled out on a mass scale do we capture the rare side effects, but they're still side effects, right? And you could get them because you have the genetics necessary to be susceptible to those kind of issues, and I might not. So I might take the vaccine and I might be fine. But your unique biochemistry might make you more prone to getting side effects.
जब तूने ये सब बातें करी, the Poonawallas infamously put a defamation case against you. You fought. If you are okay, the matters are not sub judice, can you speak about that?
100%. So this whole thing started after I won a couple of cases in the Bombay High Court and Supreme Court. So so this is me and a joint effort of Awaken India Movement. We worked with some of the top lawyers in the country, like Nilesh Oja, Prashant Bhushan, and Prashant Bhushan was representing us in Supreme Court, Nilesh Ojha was representing us in Bombay High Court. We got the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates removed in Maharashtra legally.
Legally removed.
Yes. The judge in court, he criticized the government for lying and deceiving people. And
you got the mask and vaccine mandates removed in Maharashtra.
The orders on my name. I'll send it to you.
Crazy. I was a resident
Again,
of Haryana.
to be fair, like I did have a big role, but then there were other people involved and lawyers involved.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so that happened, and then after that, we went on offensive against the vaccine manufacturers and the government itself, because they literally locked us down, destroyed tons of lives, gave people tons of side effects, and people should have always had the choice. But the issue is that it was all mandated. So that is the big problem that we had. Like, make it voluntary, don't feed on taxpayers' money, let whoever wants to buy the vaccine, based on their own individual risk benefit kind of decisions. But that wasn't done, and they went straight to the government revenue stream and took the taxpayer money out of there, and that was the main issue I had. So as in the aftermath of that, we basically sued the vaccine companies, because there was one person in a network who ended up dying 3 hours after getting the AstraZeneca shot, right? So there were cases like that. There's a case of Dr. Snehal Lunawat, who took the Covishield vaccine and died, a couple of days following that. There's, like tons of kids who've lost their lives due to the vaccine, and, it's heartbreaking. So we filed cases on their behalf, and in the aftermath of that, we were leading a protest in Pune against Serum Institute. And I had given some slogans back there and put it on Twitter and stuff. So like he saw that, and that's when he started pursuing the case against me. So he filed a defamation case against me.
Adar Poonawalla.
Yes, for 100 crores. We defended that in court for 4 months. So 4 months, our lawyer Nilesh Ojha was giving all of the arguments that we'd been briefing him on and presenting it to the judge. And the hearings were very lively. Like long, lengthy arguments have been made. All of the research, the scientific research was presented. The judgment took 4 months to came out, and the interim order came against me. So in the interim order, the judge asked me to apologize and remove my videos, and my lawyer guided me that we're appealing the judgment, so there's no need to do that. Like if we appeal and lose in the Supreme Court, then you will have to do that.
अच्छा चलो गांड फट जाती है वैसे अगर ऐसा होता है, because you're basically going against such a big organization that is directly, well, at that time in an alliance with the government. और वो सब वो कर रहे हैं कि हम देश का विकास कर रहे हैं वैक्सीन्स को फैला के और लोगों को कोविड से बचा के. If I am a member of the unthinking public, any authority figure that comes and says if you take the vaccine you're going to be prevent the risk of you getting COVID dies down, और वो risk भी नहीं बोलते कि COVID होएगा ही नहीं, वैक्सीन लगा ले. Because I've seen बिल्कुल grassroots पे देखा है ना कि बिल्कुल ही अगर कोई वर्किंग क्लास आदमी है बोलता है ओ टीका लगवा लिया मैं ठीक हूँ, तो उस लेवल की जब चल रही थी, and the name of this organization with the government was at the helm to go after them. Takes balls, bro.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was an incredibly challenging time. At the same time, it was quite effortless. It's kind of weird, but there was anxiety, and there was this rush to fight for freedom and strengthen my courage and stuff. So I've loved going through that phase. It's made me stronger in many ways and helped me to develop my character and my morals as well in a very big way.
Yeah, I remember you reached out और उस टाइम पे कि ये हो रहा है, मेरी तो गांड ही पड़ गई थी seeing your message. मैंने कहा भाई fuck, I don't even know how to respond, because it's not like छोटी मोटी चीज है इसने इसके लिए उल्टा बोल दिया है. You are literally going against a drive which is like the main drive. The nation was preoccupied with two things: saving their own life, making sure कि पैसा है घर में, बस अपना परिवार और पैसा, and facilitating that was the vaccine drive. To go against that directly. And what is the status of vaccines now? अभी क्या scene चल रहा है आजकल?
So all the mandates are off. And so that those are off since like a year and a half. Ever since we got the Supreme Court judgment, the mandates are removed all across India. Actually, the main argument we use in the case is also that there were no legal mandates in the first place. The illusion was being given of the mandates because many of the government orders which were being issued were illegal, and it's those government orders which we challenged and made it sit in the Act, the Disaster Management Act, the Epidemic Diseases Act, the Constitution. Our lawyer used all of these things to show that the orders which were being issued were illegal, and then that's
semi-emergency like state to.
Yeah, but there were technical details over there in that the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare was supposed to head the entire response, and their position was that the vaccines are voluntary, and then the other government bodies were basically mandating it. So at the national level, they had made it voluntary, but then all the states were mandating it, and in the Disaster Management Act, the states couldn't go against the center.
And
they were all violating that.
And no one was connecting the pieces to see ki chal kya raha hai. Because
Yeah,
everyone
and
was
this
just-
took months of research for even us to figure out. Like, it was very interesting exercise for us also, because the more we kept digging in, we're like, shit, this thing gets deeper, and like all these people, there's tons of money involved, there's, you know, huge kickbacks and a lot of collusion and conspiracy going on in order, because it's big bucks at the end, bro. Like one collector, one local authority mandates a vaccine, it's like a record sale, you know, in one go. So there are huge stakes involved for that.
Talking about big bucks, अभी तूने देखा recently Dubai में क्या हुआ? Dubai is flooded right now. I wanted your take on it, because one of the guys on Twitter said you should talk to him about seeding. I think that's what it's called. Seeding and chemtrails. I don't know any science behind this. मुझे को मालूम नहीं है क्या है. But I've seen Instagram पे लोग stories वही लिख रहे हैं, God fearing type की. भगवान की धरती से अगर आप खेलोगे तो यही होगा. And Dubai is literally flooded. It looks really bad. I was there very recently, and whenever I go there, I'm always reminded of it's a mirage. All of the city is one big mirage. Everything is man-made, right? And they did try to push it, and it sort of backfired. From what I know, 2 साल की बारिश एक साथ हो गई. What is the science behind this seeding stuff, and do you know something about this?
So I can't comment on the Dubai situation specifically because it's too soon, and typically like I have longer time periods where I wait for a lot of data to come in to analyze. But just talking about the theme of weather modification, geoengineering, chemtrails, this is another theme that earlier was kind of lambasted and critiqued by the mainstream for being a conspiracy theory, which only like paranoid people believe in. The government is spraying chemicals in the sky to, you know, like change the weather and stuff. But this is on record now. Like the CIA director a couple of years back came out on record, said that we do have large scale geoengineering programs.
Geoengineering?
Yeah, so this is basically the spraying of particular kind of compounds into the stratosphere. And the narrative that they're using to justify doing this now is to reduce the sun's kind of penetration on the earth, to reduce global warming. And that's the narrative through which they're using it. So earlier, it's like they keep gaslighting the people. You know, when researchers were talking about this, I give you books which were like detailing this years back, that the government had secret programs where they were spraying people. Even in America, like the military has been caught, you know, like doing secret biological warfare experiments on people, which have been, you know, exposed later on when that people had no idea. Like there's an entire trend of secret experiments that the American government has engaged in, whether that's MK Ultra or Tuskegee experiments and like tons more. So this was like earlier derided for being a conspiracy theory, and later on they just like gaslighted the people and said, no, now it's not a conspiracy theory, now we need to do this, you know, because there's like a ostensible reason that we want to reduce global warming. So definitely this is factual. You can go and look up patents on geoengineering. There's companies which take up government like kind of projects to go and spray certain chemicals in the sky. All of this stuff is on record, so it's not like, and even like the authorities are out admitting that, you know, this is on the books, like this is a technology and capability they have to change the weather, influence, like, you know, and some researchers argue that this has the ability to, you know, create earthquakes on demand, like engineer local weather events and stuff. Increase rain is a very common thing, because we know like governments have been officially doing it for a while, but it goes much deeper than that as well. Yeah.
I'm thinking about ये जो बारिश वाली चीज़ हुई है, they wanted it to be like a fertile land, but it massively backfired. पेंटागन ने तो ये बोल दिया कि भैंचो aliens हैं. When I first read a set of reports, and I know, by the way, लोग बोलते हैं कि आजकल podcasting में लोग aliens की बातें बहुत करते हैं. I did want to preface that because I've never officially talked about aliens on this podcast ever, but I want to bring it up with you because you know all sources like the back of it. All मतलब दुनिया की सारी sources से तेरा रिश्ता है. There is no denying that. But I remember reading a set of reports. Pentagon बोलता है alien है. Pension, no outcry, no independent investigation. Like the not even the tacit, the open agreement that aliens exist. No response. The world just kept on moving.
So this has actually been building up for quite some time. I know, like I have been researching this and like, you know, sharing these things with people, arguing with them for the last couple of years. So I remember like a couple of years back when the Pentagon and some people in the Air Force had released certain footage where they were, you know, observing these craft which are moving at record speeds, doing crazy maneuvers and stuff, which, you know, couldn't be explained in terms of like the state of level of technology we have for craft today. And slowly there's been a drip feed of increase of people coming out from different government sectors and establishments. Like the thing that last escalated this incident you're talking about is the testimony of David Grush. So he was a guy who's connected with intelligence, and there were people who are working in these classified programs who shared data and documents and stuff with him that some of these highly like classified black budget programs. So there are programs in America which even the Congress doesn't have oversight over because they are like deep black budget, like highly classified programs, which a lot of these big companies are involved in, like Raytheon, Boeing. A lot of whistleblowers have come out and said that these companies are actually involved in reverse engineering alien technology, and it's like these private big companies which have been
Reverse
doing this
engineering? What do you mean by
alien
that?
tech, like
खुद बनाना
crashed
चाह रहे हैं.
alien craft. So this guy's testimony, David Grush, you can go look him up. He's basically saying that the government has and these companies have like retrieved crash craft and tried to and successfully, even I think he said, reverse engineered them, and also they've retrieved bodies. And he also said like these aliens aren't all positive. So there's an entire disclosure movement which has gone on in the world since the last couple of decades, where there are tons of researchers and people who've come out and tried to mislead the public by framing certain narratives. So there's a lot of people into ufology research who are outright deceivers. Like this guy called Dr. Stephen Greer. So he started the Disclosure Project like 10-20 years back, and he got all these government people, did hearings in front of Congress in America and made them share testimonies. But the issue with that guy is he tries to portray all of the phenomenon as all aliens are good, they're out here to like help us excel technologically and like give us medical research and stuff like that. Whereas I have explored like many people in the abduction community who are experts on that, and who've written tons of books on the subject, and people who've researched aliens in general. And there are positive factions as well as negative factions. And the negative factions, like Tucker Carlson, like he's a he used to work in Fox earlier, and now,
I don't
he's
know him.
independent.
I know him, yeah.
So he was like talking about this as well on a recent podcast, not recent actually.
But it still doesn't justify why there is no response to the Pentagon openly saying कि भाई aliens exist करते हैं.
So to be fair, like it was sections of people within the establishment, like David Grush and a couple of other people, who were saying that it wasn't like an official Pentagon position. That's the reason why maybe like it didn't receive the kind of.
And they didn't get fired for this. They're still with the Pentagon.
That guy wasn't working for the Pentagon. He had connections, and I think he had worked with the intelligence community in the past, and he was no longer with them. Probably one of the reasons why. But yeah, this is top of my head. Might be different if we actually.
Very interesting. Yeah, because यार अभी तक तो बहुत हल्ला हो जाना चाहिए था, and nothing has happened. We still see the same kind of people floating more theories, but no definitive action about people either trying to find the alien crafts, trying to like.
But there are tons of people. So you won't like come across this because there's so much rampant censorship online. But if I just guide people to the right researchers and stuff, there are people who've based their entire lives on this, who've been doing this, and they've collected very, very hard, credible evidence. I interviewed some of these people last year when my YouTube channel was still active. There's a guy called Tom Montauk who I interviewed, who's one of the best brains in this space. He's read like over 1,000 books on all of these subjects, and he's had personal encounters with having abductions in his life, and using self-mastery and other.
और यहाँ पे, at what point does this become fanatic and schizophrenic? At what point does this become, hey यार हम तो विश्वास नहीं करेंगे, पागल है? And I would even extend this to you, not saying कि तू पागल है, but I'm saying कि when you say I research and I've studied these things, देख जनता का तो same ये है. I was telling you, bro, like they're gonna believe in a AIMS doctor over you, right?
100%.
Like, the fact that you do biohacking full time and I do it partially is already like a great thing to lampoon us for कि ये तो चूतियाँ ये खुद ही कुछ करते रहते हैं. डॉक्टर ही सुनो ना, कार्सिनोजेंस खाओ और कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, चिल करो. So why should people even trust these researchers or trust you?
So I believe that people need to be taught how to think, or they need to have an understanding about how to segregate different kinds of evidence and think about them. So when I think about anecdotal evidence, you can't dismiss all of it out together. Okay, so there are people who lie for the reasons of wanting attention or fame, and they deceive people with outlandish claims. And then there are accounts in the abduction literature. If you just firstly, like for anyone trying to develop their mind about any subject, it's never a wise idea to rely on experts, because you have dissenting opinions and experts in every single field. Like if you follow the experts and the mainstream official advice during the entire coronavirus situation, based on whatever we've shared, like you know what would have happened to you. You're not striking the truth over there, because the official position was that the vaccines were like totally safe and effective and it's going to prevent you.
Also, bande compromised hai. I think people
exactly.
don't,
There's a lot of conflict of interest and a lot of lobbying from the industry to, to buy out certain scientific, community people and researchers and then make them to the party line. So the thing with any kind of research is I always want people to have the same standards overall and not be biased or like cherry pick, like my bias says that like I'm more likely to believe in aliens, so then I'll cherry pick the people who are like talking in favor of that, but I'll ignore the skeptics altogether. So I developed my views after exploring everyone. Like I heard the people who were like bringing out the testimonials, and it's not just testimonials, bro, but it's also like the ancient world, evidence from the ancient world, evidence from like whistleblowers, who've been part of these projects, and tons of like everything kind of triangulates in that space. Like you have the demonology literature, so all of that has like overlaps.
Demonology?
Yeah, demonology. So
I know what it is, but how does that tie into anything we're speaking about?
So there is credible research showing that the aliens are actually run by demonic forces, and it's actually and this ties into a lot of esoteric kind of cultures as well.
Demonology. You were saying demonic forces run aliens, bro. Like my BS meter is going off. What's up with this?
So that's what I said. So you have to delve into the material yourself and develop your own mind. Like I'm basically sharing stuff that might sound outlandish when you first hear it, but when you take the time out and actually delve into channel material, metaphysics,
channel material.
Yes,
जो ये clairvoyants और ये सब receive कर रहे होते हैं psychics.
Yes.
How can you trust that? That person could also just simply be lying.
So there are ways and categories in all of these fields to separate and segregate low quality data from high quality data. Researchers are thinking about these issues, and we have standards.
But those things are not scientifically falsifiable or verifiable.
Let me give you one example. So if you're thinking about abductions, okay, how do we come to the idea that, okay, this is likely to be true or not? The barometer that I use is if it's a single source, it's likely to be flawed, or you can't like trust that. But when you have reproducibility, when you have different people in different parts of the world, all having the same experiences, describing the same people, describing the same beings, right? So there's a triangulation that happens. You connect all of those anecdotes, and once you can like make yourself certain that this dude didn't know this dude, didn't know this dude, and you've explored different authors and they have shared very similar accounts. Like if you research some of the tactics the aliens employ during abduction, and you see all these people disconnected from each other, pointing to the same direction and describing the same thing, that adds confidence. This is a technique used by intelligence agencies, by the way. It's called triangulation. That, you don't just go based on one random person comes and makes a claim. That's of course like very low in terms of how you want to think about claims, but you have to wait for the data to build. And things have to point in one direction, and this is also how we think about scientific claims as well.
How are the demonic forces related to this? I still don't get, like you're saying, okay, first of all, demonic forces ka matlab ye hai that we are looking at the world through a Christian lens, right? Because
not necessarily. Like you have negative forces in pretty much every. So these are beings on a different density who coexist with us, but we can't see them. And there is an entire spiritual hierarchy of things where you have positive forces, you have positive aliens, you have angels, you have negative aliens, and
but you have... But kahan se raha hai, Yohan? मैं तो पूछ रहा हूँ, like, are you borrowing from mythology at this point?
There is a cross-reference from multiple different fields. As I said, like, there are experts in esoteric schools of thought. So Rudolf Steiner and people like that, like, they've spoken about that from their own clairvoyant abilities, like 100, 200 years back. There are people who have sat and got, like, high-quality downloads from different beings on different densities.
Yeah.
It's a collection of all of that data. You even have like the ancient world and archaeological evidence.
I'm willing to sit with that. But I will say, जो clairvoyants होते हैं, it's like they access another realm. I don't fucking know. But as a member of the public, I don't know कि वो कौन सा world access कर रहे हैं.
Let me give you some scientific data about these things. So they have actually, skeptics, their argument is that for clairvoyants and psychics and stuff, that they are cold reading, they're guessing, they जाके देख लेंगे, what your background is, and try to make educated guesses based on your body language.
I could be a man of God and say, like, I could say today I am Prophet Muhammad and God told me कि and I founded a religion. Now, we are all living in the aftermath of Prophet Muhammad saying कि मेरे को वो prophecy आई थी, right? Similarly, clairvoyant बोलेगा मेरे को ये reading आ रही है कि आपके मरे हुए बाप ने ये बोला है या फिर ये वाली being ये बोल रही है. And people live their entire lives without meeting any demonic entity ever at all. Nothing even moderately resembling an apparition or a ghost or an evil force ever is met by them in their lives.
So different people have different life trajectories which expose them to different kind of situations. So it's not necessary that someone
क्या हुआ?
pigeon probably.
अच्छा.
So yeah, so I'll comment on this after talking about like what I want to share with you. So there are actual scientific studies which have been done on psychic. So let's leave aside channel material. I'll address that after I address this because it'll help that make more sense. But they have done controlled trials wherein they have double blinded, like let's say the person who needs a reading, like who needs guidance about a loved one who's passed away, or some difficult situation they're facing in life. So they'll just give their birthday and their name. The scientists like randomize that, so the psychic who's doing the reading doesn't know which person has given that, the person doesn't know which psychic is doing the reading, and then they compare like the predictions and the things that the psychic gets as downloads, and those data are like highly specific to the person. Like there's a debate between a Vedic astrologer and Michael Shermer as well on YouTube that you can watch, which is also a similar thing. Like they tried to do they tried to give the astrologer who was like being tested data from different people, and then they mixed up the data to actually like tell him that this is, you're giving a reading about one person but it's actually for a different person, and it didn't apply at all. And when they actually legitimately gave him the right people, his accuracy rate was like upwards of 70%, whereas when he was doing readings which weren't applicable and they just randomly distributed to people, like that level of prediction,
so they're not Barnum statements.
So it wasn't like a chance or a guess, like this 50% thing. You had like high odds in terms of actually striking. And if you see the psychic experiments which have been done, so there's an entire field of frontier science where there are people who are pushing the boundaries. So we have near-death experience research. You're asking me like where claims about demons and aliens and a lot of this comes from. So NDEs are a scientifically studied phenomenon which have like published research behind them, wherein doctors actually, like when people have these so-called NDEs, for people who haven't like heard of this is when people claim like they're very close to dying and their soul leaves the body, and they either like witness a tunnel of light or some angelic being telling them they have unfinished business, they need to go back into their body and like continue to live on earth. This has happened to many people. This has happened to neurosurgeons. So there's this one author called Anita Murjani. She wrote a book on her NDEs. There's a Ibn Alexander is a neurosurgeon who was an atheist earlier. He had an NDE and changed his mind. So this is a very well documented, published phenomenon in the literature wherein a soul leaves the body and can actually, when the brain is clinically dead or in coma, and we can make sure that it doesn't have the faculties to be able to process what is going on outside, the soul actually is like watching and observing those things, and it can come back. And you have these accounts wherein the person was thought to be dead, but this guy knows what was going on in that room and certain statements which have been made even when he was clinically dead. And that's one avenue where a lot of the information about the nature of the spirit world, the kind of forces involved, the meaning of life, purpose of life, how there are different forces on different levels trying to steer us off or push us towards a certain spiritual path or trying to take us off our path. So you have negatively oriented beings in different levels of reality. That's what comes through when you delve into the literature on satanic ritual abuse. Like there are kids in different parts of the world. There are victims who've been part of MK Ultra. I interviewed one of them last year. Her name was Kathy O'Brien. So she was part of CI's MK Ultra project, and even within that you have satanic rituals that a lot of the elites engage in.
Satanic rituals. Ek second. Satanic
so
rituals.
This is where the demonology and the that matter comes in, because when you research the elite and what they're doing in rituals, they're actually invoking demons and creating a space for to feed off the terror of the sacrifice. This is what the occultists and the people who run the world believe in. If you don't believe it, it's like
demons are Christian. Demons are Christian. Period. Okay, how will like
demons are a name I'm using to describe beings on other levels of reality which are negatively oriented. That's one term. You can call them depending on your religious background or your cultural background. Different cultures have called them different names.
Understood.
They're known as the archons in Gnosticism. There are.
Let's say I'm a member of the elite. मैंने बहुत पैसा कमाया है, बहुत दौलत कमाई है. I've got 3 fucking wives. I'm filthy rich. I'm bored. Why would I conjure up demons with a bunch of my friends? What will this give me? Why does this exist in the first place? And the fact that, I don't know, bro, it seems to me that this is too far-fetched.
That's what I'm saying, man. So the first step towards pursuing any stream of thought is to not have a preconceived bias. To leaning. Like this is the problem with a lot of atheists. They start out assuming that
I'm not an atheist.
I know, but I'm just like prefacing this by giving you an example. So a lot of atheists, when I see debates, like they assume reality is all material. And so they presuppose that non-material phenomena can't be possible. So anyone doing experiments or research in anything that's non-material out of the gate, like, because they can't perceive it, because they've already like made up their mind that reality is non-material, they can't perceive that. It's a similar thing if you're already starting out with a preconceived notion that there is no such thing as a spirit world and there are no higher entities, and you aren't even open to the idea, okay, let me delve into the research, let me read the material, where, you know, where
100%.
we can corroborate this information from different schools of thought, from different backgrounds and all points.
I believe in this shit, right? Vedic astrology. अब कोई मेरे को बोलेगा बहन जो exist नहीं करती, बिल्कुल. I completely understand that, you know, there is a certain bias and a certain restriction that I'm approaching this conversation from. But
and in fact, it lines up. Like, there is tons of like Hindu beliefs and you know, like ways of thinking which agree with what I've just described out here in terms of, you know, negative asuric forces trying to meddle with our lives and trying to take us off our path. Like, I have friends who are Hindus who also, you know, like resonate with me and share the same beliefs on a lot of these things, but they're just using like different terms to describe the same kind of phenomenon and forces.
I'm going to sit with the tension of not agreeing with this and just letting it sit. And after we're done, maybe शायद मैं देखूंगा कि यार इस पे research करते हैं क्या कह रहा है.
100%.
Okay, but तेरा दिमाग कैसे खराब नहीं होता?
I did, man. Like, I was depressed when I initially got into this. And it's one thing where you're skeptical and you've not yet bought into it, because that time you're just like skimming through books and listening to different people and trying to develop an opinion.
The alien identities. It says right here, Dark Mission, the secret mission of NASA. Guys, I would highly recommend you have Yohan recommend. I recommend Yohan एक किताब का tour करे, because you'll see the kind of things he reads. Human race, get off your knees, the lion sleeps no more. My goodness, bro. यहाँ पे सिर्फ एक atomic habits एक रखी हुई है दिखाने के लिए कि हाँ guys, positive self help भी है.
नहीं पूरा section है यहाँ पे, power of the subconscious mind.
Self help की सिर्फ 8-10 किताबें दिखाने के लिए, बाकी सब space, God, Cities and Kings. What's this book, God, Cities and Kings?
It's by David Frawley. It's on ancient Vedic civilization and how that has overlaps with Sumerian culture. Like, that's what the book is about. So yeah, there's tons out here from you know, different fields. Whatever I say and whatever opinions I express are based on me sitting and like researching like a maniac for years on different subjects. And as I was talking like before we even met, right now my main focus is on the medical and health side of things, because that's, you know,
before we get into that, I want to ask you, what's the Atlantis blueprint? Atlantis वाकई में शहर है, or is it just some myth that people talk about?
So the thing is, for many subjects, I haven't delved that deep to have strong opinions. Like, when I talk about libertarianism or vaccines or like, you know, biohacking, alternative health, I've spent like living and breathing like tons and tons of hours, even with subjects like metaphysics and aliens. Like, I have the expertise and confidence to know all sides, because I say that because I've explored everyone and I know the set of ideas that are out there and I understand them, and that's how I reach my opinions after listening to everyone. But for archaeology, I would say that that's not the case, but I want to develop that throughout life, which is why like a lot of the books I have out here, I don't have like, I'm not steeped in them, but it's something that is my passion that I want to do throughout life. Archaeology would fall into that. So from whatever I've heard, like Graham Hancock speak about, and so he does make convincing arguments for like ancient civilization and, you know, how there was this flood after which like humanity had to start all over again, and there's evidence of that in different parts of the world in the Grand Canyon and stuff that he presents. But then I don't know the skeptical side of things enough. I haven't sat and watched the debates to be able to
know the
like,
believer side of things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I've heard some. I watched one debate of like Michael Shermer and Graham Hancock many years back, and so the thing is, in any field, it takes a long time for you to like get steep, know the terminology, understand like, you know, the terms and the things that people are talking about. And I just like experienced that delving deeper into biology. Like 5 years back, I thought I knew a lot about health, but now I'm like, fuck, I don't know jack shit, bro. And probably like 5 years down the line, I'll think the same way. So wisdom is ever expanding, and I'm always open to changing my mind. But whatever, you know, opinions I speak very strongly about are things that have developed and, you know, stood the test of time for myself as well, and also heard a lot of contradictory opinions, explored contradictory sources, and I can still justify my beliefs by giving, you know, the contrary evidence.
You know, if you अगर तू बस हिंदुओं के साथ जुड़ के बात करेगा ना कि बाहर विमान थे, तो सारे alien की बात मान लेगा. That's the wave right now, and I'm saying that because there's a book called Vimana.
Yeah.
Aircrafts of ancient India
and Atlantis.
हाँ, if you just say ना हमारे culture में, it'll fucking work. Like they'll be like, हाँ Yohan, now we believe you.
I know that, man. Like, I kind of have a knack for understanding a certain set of people, and then even when I go and broach them, and I know how to present a certain thing in which fits their worldview in order to make it more appealable.
No, you are a very convincing, argumentative, persuasive person. But thankfully, I have my मैंने वो vampire का वो garlic लेके आया हूँ. मैं यहाँ कान के पीछे छुपा रखा है, so
No,
that
man.
I don't
Like
get bitten by
the thing is, I have
the.
been wrong about things in the past as well. So
Yeah.
I am always open to changing my own mind. In fact, there are many things I used to believe which I have changed my mind on. So I always appreciate skepticism, and anything that comes up in these conversations gives me room for thought as well to go and like double check my beliefs or to like make sure I'm on the right track. So appreciate
Good.
it.
Now let's talk about health. In fact, let's talk about depression. और कारण ये है कि if I don't work out और मैं sedentary रहता हूँ, I feel sad and I feel upset. Excessive phone use करता हूँ. Feel upset and sad and annoyed at my life situation. If I don't get sunlight, I feel sad. If I don't meet people, I feel sad. If I lie dormant for too many hours, I feel sad. If I don't have engaging, meaningful activity, I feel sad. I eat too much junk. It's very, very tasty in the short term.
In the moment, yeah.
Yeah, but overall, then I feel sad. Feeling a lot of sad. काफी sadness चल रही है. And I'm able to counteract it using a few things. I work out really, really hard. I take some sunlight. I meet some people. But I don't think I've cured this sadness. Now, two things. सबसे पहले तो I think this is particularly prevalent amongst Gen Z is that they confuse sadness to be something that needs to be treated. It's a regular human emotion to feel sad, right? Feeling sad all the time, perhaps you need to deal with a life situation, no problem. But एक तो जो ये wrongly misdiagnose करना कि मैं depressed हूँ, that, and then second, I know many people जो SSRIs और meds वगैरह use करते हैं depression से cope करने के लिए. Classic example is people's idea of reality becomes not a 10 and a 1 that they're usually used to, but a solid 6 all the time. So, तू बहुत सारे लोगों को देख रहा है now as a biohacker consultant and you're helping them overcome depression as not as a medical doctor, right? But simply as someone who's curious and wants to help people through supplementation. What have you observed about this illness, this disorder? क्या बोलेंगे इसको?
So yeah, whatever we spoke about earlier are my interests and passions, but health is something that is my career. So in terms of like my academic background, I have a bachelor's in nutrition science. I got my functional medicine training from a doctor in America who teaches like medical students and people who are doctors how to train and develop a deeper understanding about blood chemistry interpretation, diagnostics, and like what evidence-based protocols we can use in the natural medicine space and diet, lifestyle, supplements to be able to help people with issues. So like this is what I've been doing professionally as well for the last couple of years. I've recently started my own practice where I've started seeing patients, and I've got a couple of people who are struggling with depression, who've been on SSRIs for a couple of years. We were able to get one person off successfully of SSRIs, another person is a work in progress, the third person has just come on board. So and also I've like done a lot of work with the past company that I was working with. That's why I got tons of clinical experience, because in the course of the 3 years that I worked at that company, I've seen tons and tons of blood reports, extensive biomarkers run, gut microbiome testing, genetics. So I've seen patients who've come to us for all chronic diseases, whether it's autoimmunity, mental health conditions like we're talking about depression, skin issues, and developed a good understanding not just from reading the research and the studies and the literature, but also just like seeing people one-on-one and testing them and finding out what physical factors are involved in this case behind the mental health conditions. Because it's a very big misconception. Like I was talking about this to a friend the other day, and we've been speaking about this for a long time, and she was like, shit man, like it strikes so hard when you really realize that a lot of mental health problems actually have a physical origin basis, and the literature is super clear on that. So just in the course of seeing all these depression patients, I like whenever a patient comes to me, I like do a even deeper deep dive into the subject. So this is some of the things I learned, some of the things I knew before, some of the things I learned more in the last couple of months. But everything from a vitamin D deficiency to a magnesium deficiency to a zinc deficiency to a omega-3 fatty acid deficiency, creatine deficiency in DHEA. So all of these, DHEA is a precursor to making testosterone in the body. So all of these things independently, both lines of evidence. One is looking at the markers in the blood of depressed patients, comparing them to controls, and finding that the people who are depressed have lower levels of these nutrients. That's one line of evidence, that the people who are depressed have low levels of these nutrients and compounds I mentioned. Another thing is interventional trials where they're giving depressed people, I didn't mention B12, B12 is another one. So all of these things, you can go and look up the research, multiple randomized control trials where large sets of people are taken, their nutrient deficiencies are, of course, like diagnosed first properly, like they have to have a deficiency and then they're corrected, and we see like dramatic improvements in mental health symptoms. So in these kind of studies, they're very high quality. The depression, not just someone saying or like describing, they're detailed questionnaires which are, validated to pick up depression, anxiety. There's proper, thorough diagnosis and tracking of with detailed questionnaires exactly how their symptoms are improving in all of the tiny different areas of depression, in the blues or in anxiety or overthinking. All these things are heavily tracked in the studies. And for every single one of the compounds I mentioned, we see that these deficiencies are creating depression. Like it's not these are root cause reasons for why people get depression. This is not a comprehensive list. There are more, but I'm giving you some examples which I can name top of my head. I can cite studies right now. And you can go and look up the research and see that even interventionally, when these people are corrected for these deficiencies, their depression symptoms decline. I've seen it happen to people I've worked with, and I've seen it tons in the medical literature. Along with this, one more thing, there's a huge component of infections causing depression. So believe it or not, there are people who get H. pylori infections in the gut. This is a bacteria that infects the stomach cells and reduces the capacity of the stomach cells to secrete stomach acid. That has been seen to like increase depression. There's studies on people having H. pylori.
How does it happen?
So the mechanisms, mainly through gut microbiome modulation, there are various mechanisms described in the papers. One of it is H. pylori. When you get an infection upstream, it reduces the stomach acid and the bile, so it makes it much easier for other kind of pathogens to go down. And these pathogens actually mess up the microbiome environment in the gut. So the gut is supposed to have beneficial levels of bacteria, different strains like Akkermansia, Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, Roseburia, Faecalibacterium. There's tons of these species which have been studied, which are very important for maintaining a healthy gut lining, for producing short chain fatty acids, butyrate. So many of the byproducts, the metabolites of these good bacteria in our gut, they are extremely important for mental health. A lot of the people, most people don't know this, but most of the serotonin and dopamine is actually made in your gut, and then it's transported to the brain, and other parts of the body.
Simplistic question, but if I eat a bunch of dahi or kefir, that's going to fix my gut bacteria? Do I need to have a specific supplementation program to fix it?
Every medical intervention requires proper diagnosis first. So the way in which I approach complex gut disorders, because I've worked with people who have had IBS, irritable inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, like a lot of bad gut conditions, even SIBO. So you have to first diagnose like what is the level of the individual beneficial bacteria and which microbes which are bad are overgrowing. So
what kind of test would you do?
They could have parasites, they could have worms, they could have fungal overgrowth, they could have certain viruses. It can be like many things, and the treatment outcome for all of these are radically different. Like if someone comes to me with H. pylori, the specific compounds which have been studied for that, which have been shown in clinical trials to reduce titers. If someone comes to me with like a parasite infection, which can also cause like a lot of mental health issues, then there's a different protocol for that. So talking about the mechanism, they didn't finish on this point, but one main reason H. pylori is thought to cause like mental health issues is due to actually impairing the stomach acid production, and this lack of stomach acid makes it harder for you to absorb B12. So that's one mechanism. But then there are many like this that researchers are kind of coming across, where these infections are impacting the neurotransmitter production in the gut, they're impacting the way we absorb nutrients. They themselves are creating inflammation. Inflammation is another factor which causes depression. Like the higher your CRP levels, the more you're likely to have depression, and the worse your depression symptom. There's been studies that have correlated inflammatory biomarkers like hsCRP, ESR with depression as well. So all of these things are testable. You can measure these things. I've been doing this for the last couple of years. Now it's come to a point where I'm literally testing like over 100 biomarkers every single month, and making precise changes to make sure like I'm at the lowest risk of different diseases. So all of these markers, they have tons of literature where if like, let's say CRP levels are up, my risk of heart disease goes up, my risk of having depression goes up. So there's literature like that on every single biomarker that I've been collecting and compiling. And then I just basically do this on myself. That's where I learn the most. Like a lot of the stuff that's come through, I've tried, tested on myself, seen if it's having the exact impact on the things that I'm measuring, which like if I'm doing a testosterone boosting protocol, I don't do it blindly. I'll track most people just track the total testosterone, but I track my free testosterone, I track my DHEAS, I track my sex hormone binding globulin. And I'm bringing this up because you said you did your testosterone.
मैं अभी दिखाऊंगा. I'm quite excited about that. I want to do it live with you. Okay. But 2 questions before we do that. Number 1, I think there is a general consensus in the medical community now to have your blood work done regularly. I'm talking about the average Indian जो ब्रेड टोस्ट खाता है, चिल भी करता है, इतना नहीं सोचता, थोड़ा बहुत वर्कआउट, वॉक, थोड़े पुशअप्स लगा लेता है. Let's just talk about that because there are echelons to this shit. You know that, right?
Like, yeah, you can go as deep as
Yeah, you can go as deep as possible. For that person, when they typically do blood tests, वो Healthians का platinum package ले लेते हैं, इसमें सब कुछ मिल जाता है एक साथ, right? And
लगता है आपको, I'll speak about that.
हाँ, तो ऐसा लगता है. मुझे भी ये बोला कि यार देख 66,000 में तेरे ना 127 टेस्ट हो रहे हैं, ले, ठीक है जी.
66,000?
6,000 में मैं एग्जांपल दे रहा हूँ, ठीक है, like ballpark figure.
Yeah.
एक वाओ यार, 127 tests, me, all these things. I don't know how to read it, right? I can just predict कि एक डॉक्टर ने जो प्रिस्क्राइब कर रखी है एक रेंज, let's just say mg/dl, कुछ रेंज है ऐसी, हेमोग्लोबिन की फॉर एग्जांपल, वहां पे उन्होंने दे रखा होगा 0 से लेके 14, ठीक है, और मेरा होगा 13, मैं बोलूंगा मैं खुश हूँ. But then I realized कि this is like for bare minimums. You actually need to cross these ranges, and in certain areas it's better to cross these ranges and be above them, right? To be excess in some things.
So much to say about this. Since you're talking about hemoglobin, literally yesterday I was doing a literature review on hemoglobin, and I'll give you one example, and it'll help us to and the viewers to understand
about the ranges and the degree of tests also.
Yes. So one is the number of tests. When you go and do a standard package with Thyroid or Healthians or anyone, their tests are nowhere near as comprehensive as they need to be. When I test, I am looking at, I have counted them, I'm looking at 135 biomarkers on every single patient who walks into my practice. Like, I am testing those level of biomarkers. A Healthians package or a Thyroid package will cover max 60, 70, not more than that.
Achha.
So there's a difference in the number of metabolites which are measured. And everything I measure is clinically significant. Nothing I measure is like, okay, ye high hai, so it doesn't like mean much, or it's, we don't know much about it. Every single thing I'm measuring has something it's increasing your risk for, some symptoms it's linked to, and I have a strategy to either reduce that or increase that if it's high or low. Right, that's the level of like knowledge I have on every single
track it with
biomarker.
Successive blood tests.
I've shared all this data on public. You can go to my Instagram profile. It's at Tengra, and you can see my highlights. I have a blood work highlight where I've shared my entire journey of like my last 6-7 years. Because the reason I got into this is because I used to struggle with very bad symptoms. My back would be filled with like 30-40 breakouts at one day. I had severe back knee. Seborrheic dermatitis, like if I was sitting right now and I had that, like this would be red, this would be entirely red, scaling white, and my scalp would be covered
psoriasis?
In white scale. No, this is seborrheic dermatitis. So dandruff is one expression of sebderm where it just happens on the scalp, but when it goes to the rest of the body, it's called sebderm. So sebderm may like this area, this area, this area, all of this gets red, inflamed, and if it goes extreme, it'll start tearing and like getting dandruff on the face. And the same thing over my chest. So this problem progressed to an extent where this was on my chest, on my back, face, scalp, everything, like confidence destroyed. Along with that, I had chronic fatigue. Like right now, I'm fucking pumping with energy, but before I would sleep 13-14 hours and wake up and yawn 50 times throughout the day. It was that bad.
And I also with all the caffeine, सब कुछ करने के बाद.
Sab bro, like, and that was the time when I was trying my keto diet phase, and I was going out and taking sun and fucking grounding every day, and I thought I'm doing the best shit in the world to help my health, and eating clean and watching the ingredients and eating organic only. And I'm like, dude, my health is worsening. What's going on? Some things did get better when I did keto, like my mental performance got much sharper. But it's nothing I can't replicate. Like we took the nootropics before this show. I'm in the same zone I used to be when I was doing keto as well. So these things are hackable, and the thing is, every diet or anything like is helpful for one person can be like, this is what I was telling you before the podcast as well. Like one man's food can be another man's poison. Health truly, is that truly, like, I've seen it again and again. Like one person will thrive on soy because it has certain isoflavones. Like a woman who's menopausal will thrive on soy because she, like needs.
Really?
Yeah, but then the same thing if you're giving to a hypothyroid person, like it can worsen their thyroid profile, right? So everything is like context driven and dependent. Iron, like red meat, can be great for some women who's anemic and who needs more iron, as low ferritin, but it can be extremely toxic to a man who's not menstruating, has some genes which predispose him to having iron overload, and then he's having iron every day and it's damaging his liver, it's damaging his brain, because iron is like in everything in medicine is all about range, right? This is what we're talking about. So let's take hemoglobin for example. Hemoglobin levels, there's an optimal range, right? And for men and women it's different. So I'm just telling this fresh off my head, just like literally sat and read like 50 papers yesterday and developed a range for myself. So the optimal range for men is like 15 to 16.
15 to 16,
yes,
is that narrow?
15 to 16, yes. And there's a optimal, a suboptimal, and a high critical high. So everything in blood chemistry moves in phases. Let's take insulin, for example, it's relatable to people easily. If you go between 6 to 15, you have first phase like insulin resistance. If you go 15 to 20, moderate. If you go above 25, that's when you have full-blown diabetes. Same thing for HbA1c. If you 5 to 5.3, least risk of having diabetes and very metabolically healthy. You go above 5.7, you have pre-diabetes. You go above 6.5, you're diagnosed as having diabetes. Everything moves like that. So even for hemoglobin and all of these markers and ranges, you want to see how off you are. If you're a suboptimal, it's not as bad as like being crazy high, right? Like my hemoglobin levels, let me give you practical implications. Hemoglobin is an other thing which has been seen to worsen mental health, especially in older adults. Like lower hemoglobin levels have been shown to increase the risk of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's and stuff. Tons of trial on this. So if my levels are, let's say like the official kind of cutoff for having anemia is having hemoglobin under 12 for men. So if my levels are like between 12, above 12 and under 15, I'll be suboptimal and a normal range won't catch it.
So what is a normal range in a blood test? Because I think
a normal range, I think it's the cutoff is 11 if I'm not mistaken, right? And like let's take another example for B12. Like a lot of people know about B12. The normal range for B12 is 200 to 1100. Okay, but I'll cite you studies where depression studies, funnily enough, like let's talk about this. So there's studies done on depressed patients with low normal B12 levels. So their B12 is normal in the like lab standard range. You go and do thyroid care and all that. That's the range you'll see everywhere. So they are above 200, but they're less than 400. So they're in that low normal zone. They have seen in the research that when these low normal people are also given B12, they improve much more than the people who are not given B12 at all. So that tells me that even if I'm in the normal range, I still have more scope to like improve my mental health even further.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where we're developing our optimal ranges from. The normal ranges have come based on researchers looking at people who are going and getting tests done, which typically tend to be sick people mostly.
I was gonna say कि मतलब जब doctor एक advice भी देता है कि if you just walk you're gonna be fine, he's literally telling the worst of the worst. He's telling very old people to do that कि आप bare minimum like mobility करो. But a 27-year-old listen to that like, oh, I walk 10,000 steps a day and that's enough. Like that's a lie. It's literally like destroying your health. Another thing, मैंने खुद टेस्ट करा था एक human lab ने बोला, I think this was in lockdown. He's like, he quoted a few studies where he said that if you take 1500 milligrams or micrograms of omega-3, it's as effective as an antidepressant. And I thought that was pretty controversial.
Before this thing I mentioned the omega-3 index. Do you remember I was talking about how if your omega-3 index, your red blood cell EPA, DHA, easily measurable. There are labs in India doing this.
So he said उसके अंदर ना EPA होना चाहिए.
Yes.
The EPA should be 550 milligram or something like that. So each capsule has that. So I wanted to make sure कि मैं अगर ले रहा हूँ ना 3, the EPA goes to 1500 plus. That's what he said. Now I did it for a month or two. And I can tell you for a fact, मेरी मम्मी बोलती थी कि यार एक ही ले लिया अगर वहाँ पे उस पे लिखा है. मैंने कहा यार you don't know 4 भी लो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. And those days, I'm just saying बहुत छोटा सा था. I would be flying. I'm not saying that I would not have bad days, but just a general buoyancy of spirit. Something I observed just taking that.
And I'll tell you why. There's tons of research published on the omega-3 index, like how low your red blood cell EPA, DHA levels are. So that's the storage form of omega-3s. Like this is the best place to test omega-3 levels in the blood. And there's such crazy research on this. Like it's one of the things I use the most in my practice are like omega-3 supplements, because there's the literature on that and the number of areas in which it helps in depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's prevention, heart disease prevention. There's tons of large scale trials which have been done where, when you like normalize someone's omega-3 index, you reduce the risk of heart attacks, you reduce the risk of having stroke.
Every single day? If you take it every single day?
So it all depends on how low your levels are, and that way the supplementation should be customized. So if you walk into my practice and you get omega-3 index done and your levels are between 4 and 8%, I can just get you there in like 2 to 3 grams of fish oil. I'm not talking EPA, DHA, like just fish oil, 2 to 3 grams.
Just fish oil, huh?
You'll get to an ideal index. Ideal levels are 8 to 12%. That's where we see the lowest risk of heart disease and all-cause mortality. So the research on this is so crazy. A smoker who has a high omega-3 index has the same level of mortality, death, as a non-smoker who has a low omega-3 index. So this is not an endorsement for smoking, but it's just about thinking about moving different variables.
I've got Nicotex with me.
But yeah, like omega-3s can literally offset a lot of the damage which is caused by smoking and give you the same life expectancy as someone who's not smoking but has a low index. But ideally, of course, you want to not smoke and have a high index. That's what puts you in the best category. There's research like this on so many things. Like there's this thing called VO2 max testing. So this measures the maximum amount of oxygen you can uptake. Crazy research on this. Like, and this is something that's easily modifiable. Like you can do slow steady state cardio combined with high intensity interval training. Like specific types have been studied in meta-analysis to improve this metric. And if you get from a low zone to a high zone, you can increase your life expectancy by like 3 to 4 times. It's crazy.
What?
Yes.
अच्छा मतलब मैं VO2 max session करूँगा कैसे लेकिन? What's the zone I need to be in to do it?
Okay, so you need to go to a metabolic lab. This is where this is done, and there are good hospitals who are doing this.
यहाँ
So
मुंबई दिल्ली मेट्रोज में है ऐसे कुछ?
है मैंने कराया है इसके लिए. Like I'm saying, so there's Reliance Hospital out here. Both Kokila Ben and the Reliance out here, both of them offer this service where
Oh,
you
is
can
it
go
the
and
thing
do your
where
VO2 max.
you sort of नाक में कुछ पहनाते हैं वो और
You
तुम
may wear a
treadmill पे भाग
mask
रहे
and
होते
then
हो?
they increase the
हाँ,
intensity on the treadmill. I just got it done like a couple of months back, and I'm in like the average category. I'm not low, but I'm average, and that made sense because I even when I hit the gym, I never did cardio and like high intensity stuff. I was mainly focusing on like strength training. So this is something that I'm going to retest in a couple of months after, you know, like working on doing more HIIT and more steady state cardio. But there's things like this. There's low hanging fruit. There's supplements and right strategies which you can use to get the most with the least amount of investment. That's where your focus should be first. So for anyone thinking about like fancy biohacking, just get your basics right. Most people aren't even getting the basics
चलो ठीक
right.
है. Let's not even talk about like, okay, look at me. I'm kind of skinny fat right now.
Yeah.
Working on getting out of that now. ठीक है, because TMJ की वजह से, I'll tell you about that and crazy story. The dentist started to realign my jaw.
Okay.
And उसकी वजह से, and I'm reading the research on that more and more every single day. उसकी वजह से the neck sort of craned forward, the body tilted to the right, और पूरा posture बदलना शुरू हो गया.
Damn.
And now I'm working to reverse that using physiotherapy and a gym that specializes in this postural alignment, but like through exercise by strengthening the left side. And all of this has just made me believe that it is really okay to be hyper anal about these things, because whenever I go and talk about my uniquely specific health problems to others, their sign is like तेरे को कितनी अजीब बीमारियां होती रहती हैं. And there is a common shaming that जो लोग normal साधारण जिंदगी जी रहे होते हैं, रात को दाल खा ली, फिर रोटी खा ली, फिर अपना चल रहे हैं, ठीक है, that they do for people who want to be better, you know, live and feel better inside their bodies and cure ailments. Like the worst is to live with pain or to live with disease and just be on a bunch of meds. So for anyone who's watching this, जो अभी depressed, let's just talk about that. Like, because, you know, I think many people will relate with it. Modern life, you know, I was telling you about noise pollution. So many distractions, so many problems. Low testosterone, bad social life, zindagi mein kuch ho nahi raha hai, bad nutrition. Many people watching this are depressed, right? You and I have both experienced depression as well. For those people, what can we do in a biohacking perspective? क्योंकि उनको तो ये है कि मैं बताता हूँ, जर्नलिंग कर लो, वॉक पे चले जाओ, अच्छा खा लो, सुबह जल्दी उठ जाओ. We're dealing with that. So what can those people do?
Start with the low-hanging fruit first. Let me take this from basic to intermediate to advanced, just for depression. So people will get like how much you can go inside if you want to, like, you know, crack more and more.
Right.
What's the basic and the science on depression, and the cheapest things, easiest things to apply, right? You can just go and apply right after watching this podcast. That is going to make your depression sure better based on published research in medical journals. Number one is getting more light exposure in the day. You know, so they have seen this to be sometimes as effective as antidepressants. Like just getting morning light exposure. So like having the light of the sun fall into your eyes and just having bright light exposure in the day. In some trials, this has been seen to be as effective as antidepressants. Cheap, free thing that you can start with. Number two is exercise. Tons of research on strength training, on all forms of exercise and helping with mental health like crazy. You've seen this anecdotally also. Tons of people go to the gym to get over the issue. Breakup hota hai, kuch hota hai. Everyone
the
just
gym
goes
bros
to the
are
gym.
like, you know, the gym is the best antidepressant, and sometimes they're not wrong.
No, they're not wrong according to the science. This has been clinically studied, and there are mechanisms through which working out actually improves mental health. It improves the size of the hippocampus and like gray matter in the brain and like tons of things. There's physiological effects of exercise on mental health. So those are like low-hanging fruits. Sleeping at the right time, optimizing your circadian rhythm. So like sleeping, you can say, but go to sleep by 10, 11, wake up in the morning, catch the morning sunrise, get bright light exposure in the day. All of these things are great lifestyle things you can do Meditation is another big one. So tons of literature on meditation, qigong, just like stress reduction techniques, helping to even like
Qigong.
yes,
What's
there's a
qigong?
published literature. It's I haven't delved too deeply into that, but I'm saying based on the literature for like mindset modification, qigong is something that comes up often in
Some kind of
in the
Eastern-
recommendations. It's an
Eastern
Eastern
practice of some kind?
to improve mental health, along with meditation. Even breathwork has studies behind it to like lower cortisol and improve mental health and stuff. So all of these things are there in a free way to improve mental health. After you're done with this, you start with just doing basic blood work and do cheap labs. Okay, don't go for like the more expensive advanced stuff, but all of the things I mentioned. Creatinine is part of every single kidney panel we get done. Okay, let's take magnesium. Magnesium is a cheap thing that you can add to any test. B12 is something that everyone's testing for. Don't fall for the normal ranges. That's another thing I would say. So on my Instagram, I've shared some optimal ranges for some of these things as well. Serum magnesium is not something that like in your normal report will show you're normal if you're not less than 1.8. That's the cutoff, but there's studies which show that 2.1 and above is what's needed. So you can be like 1.9, you go to get a report done, you'll be like I'm normal, but actually you need to be above 2.1. So that's the thing with a lot of these markers in the reference ranges. Like you might think you normalize something or you're normal, but you're actually not. That's where it's like
That's also true for the lower the जो बोलते हैं जैसे क्या बोलते हैं उसको, what's the word, like when you start the range, what's that word called, the end and the
both ends.
yeah.
Even for the higher side, like let's take B12
no,
example
the lower
as well.
side also, because I remember for a fact like some people are on the lower side and they just sort of make it in the threshold.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
So
yeah.
but then so that's the example I gave for B12, where someone on the lower end, like in the 200s, the normal range is like above 200 ke upar hona chahiye. And then the 200s and the reporters come back as normal. So they need to get above 400 to actually be in the optimal B12 zone.
What about the higher ends then?
Higher end ka bhi risk badhta hai. So this is another thing I wanted people to think about, is that a lot of people are just randomly blindly taking supplements today, and it can backfire in many cases. Let me give you an example. So on B12 and folate, there's specific research. High dose of this continuously helps to speed cancer growth. There's tons of
Speed up cancer growth.
Yes.
So if you take high volumes of B12,
Yes.
you're gonna have cancer. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and serum B12 levels have also been linked diagnostically. Like I've seen many people who come and they have crazy high B12 levels, and they are vegetarian or vegan. Like I've seen cases like this, and you wonder like what the hell is going on. But the research is very clear in that there are tons of chronic disease conditions which can also influence these biomarkers. So another thing people need to understand in like when you're doing tests and stuff is sometimes a marker might make you think something like serum iron ka test kar liya and you're normal, you think like iron levels so badhiya hai, but that's the worst marker for iron status. If you look at serum potassium, you think potassium levels are fine, but again that's not a good marker for potassium status, because there's reasons in that serum iron and potassium both can be influenced by 5 to 10 things other than those nutrients. So there are better markers to test. Like for iron, you look at ferritin levels, you look at TIBC. Most people do a panel, not even know what these things are. They look at the serum and they think they're fine.
They usually look at the graphic जो वो बना के देती है
हाँ, और वो
company.
रेड करके देंगे
वो
कि
red
भाई
की
ये
parts
यहाँ पे
red
इश्यू
हैं.
है, थायराइड में इश्यू है. थायराइड का बताता हूँ. थायराइड कन्वेंशनली
I got I am borderline TSH to alarm.
What's the number?
I don't have the
remember?
report right now. Huh?
But yeah, let me give you an example of this. Perfect.
But
So-
this is also from November when I was completely sedentary, doing nothing at all.
Okay, so having hypothyroid does contribute to weight gain, and having TSH, which is like for the normal report to flag it, you need to be very high, like over 5 or sometimes even more than that.
I can look it up.
For sure. But the optimal range for ideal metabolic rate and prevention of every other like risk of thyroid is seen under 2. Right? So this is radically different from the conventional range. Like if you just go open your report and see TSH, you'll see that the range is much higher than the 2 number that I'm talking about. So I pick up, like many times people come to test with me and we can pick up things early because certain doctors aren't doing the right test. Like for example, there's research which shows that thyroid antibodies get elevated years before you get a thyroid problem, like a diagnosis of Hashimoto's.
I can't find it. In fact, अगर मैं खोलूँगा ना अभी,
No worries, bro.
तो फिर it's gonna shut the recording down. But I do have the testosterone report if you want to read that.
Oh, we can check that for sure.
Yeah. But finish the thought first.
Yeah. So I was saying that thyroid antibodies, there's research showing that it can predict thyroid issue years before it happens. Like, so there's a lot of tests like that where you can catch problems quite early. Like I'll give you an example. I was working on this depression case last month, and he came to me and he had like crazy high thyroid antibodies, 1000 ke upar hai. Okay, and this guy doesn't have any thyroid symptoms yet. But there's also another problem. He did have depression, and getting like depression is one of the symptoms of having Hashimoto's and like having thyroid issues like hypothyroid. But there are many other, like people typically think about thyroid, they think weight gain, dry skin,
Gala
baal
bada
gir
ho
rahe hai,
jayega, haan.
getting a goiter. But there's more symptoms as well. So this guy did have depression and his thyroid antibodies were super elevated. That's been something which has been seen in the literature to, you know, trigger depression, is having hypothyroid. This is a known cause of depression. So this guy wasn't overweight. He isn't overweight yet. He hasn't got some of the worst symptoms of thyroid, but he's on his way there, right? And if I don't correct that and if I don't bring him down, in a couple of years, guaranteed he's going to develop a thyroid disorder. So that's the power of preventive diagnostics and knowing which markers to test for and knowing the value and the utility and the clinical use of these markers, and that you can catch problems way before they start. Like for Alzheimer's disease, for example, there's a marker called apolipoprotein A. Okay, so there's ApoB, which is the protein which tags all the LDL particles and other atherogenic proteins, and then there's ApoA, which tags like all the good cholesterol. So even ApoA levels, like when they're lower, they've been seen to track and increase Alzheimer's risk. In fact, researchers are suggesting that as an early biomarker of Alzheimer's disease risk.
If APOE is low,
yes,
then
it increases your risk of having Alzheimer's.
And who should get tested for this? Like people jo 40 mein for 50 mein?
This is the idea that I'm trying to bring to the people with everything I'm doing, is that this is valuable for every single person. Of course, there's a budget, there's a preference, there's how deep you want to go. But for every strata of different kinds of people, you can dip into it as much as you want. You can go for the low-hanging fruit and optimize all the lifestyle diet things that we haven't spoken about diet yet, but at least all the lifestyle things, and just eat like a broad Mediterranean style diet. This is what I recommend to most people.
मैंने देखो Instagram पे story पे करा था.
I know.
Mediterranean diet बना रहा है मुंबई के कूड़े pollution के अंदर, noise के अंदर. I was like, bro, there are no weather factors that support the Mediterranean diet here.
I'll tell you the reasoning for that. So if you just look at the research, both observation studies and actual interventional trials, hands down, this has the most amount of evidence compared to anything that's out there. Like I'm saying this after being a keto person for 2 years, after being a vegan, like gone on all the rabbit holes.
What's the
for a
Mediterranean
generally
diet?
healthy person, that's the diet to follow. Of course, there are individual foods within that diet which can cause issues for different people. Like let's say someone has small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or they have, you know, like bad certain pathogens growing, they can react badly to the fiber. Okay, but that doesn't make fiber bad. It's just like it's bad for the wrong person who already has like overgrowth happening in the wrong place, and you know you have to solve that microbial problem first in the gut, and then they can start tolerating fiber. This is the one thing I wanted to mention about autoimmunity and carnivore diets also. Many people who go carnivore, they see great benefits in like cutting down autoimmune symptoms, and there are like good reasons for that. You know, plants have many antigenic proteins which can trigger you if you have the susceptibility, if you have the genetic susceptibility.
If you have the genetical susceptibility.
And if your host factors and defenses are also weakened. I've seen this tons working in my practice, wherein you have certain infections and they can make you cross-react to certain foods. Like people having mold, it actually makes you cross-react to other foods and makes you react to them. You have H. pylori. This is known in the
So elimination diets pointless hai?
Pointless thing, it's very helpful for the short term, but the problem with elimination diet is you'll end up developing the risk of many other health issues in the long run. So if we think about carnivore diets and ketogenic diets, one of the main things that concerns me is skyrocketing LDL levels in many people. So there's like I've heard all of the arguments from all of the carnivore people that track, like, you know, Dave Feldman and all the people in that space who, you know, are LDL skeptics and who believe that LDL and ApoB don't have anything to do with heart disease. But I've delved deep into the literature, and a lot of the arguments that Paul Saladino and people like that make when they say like, okay, LDL is fine, like you can have high cholesterol, but you should not have insulin resistance, you should not have inflammation, फिर ठीक है, फिर LDL कुछ नहीं करता. That's bullshit. Like I've looked at the research and they have taken people who don't have diabetes, who don't have insulin resistance, who don't have inflammation, फिर उनके LDL levels देखे, and even in people who don't have any inflammation, like the CRP levels are crazy low, their insulin is under 6, like those two things are done, still LDL increases heart disease risk. So they have done studies where they've accounted for these things which these influencers mentioned, like ये ठीक है तो ये problem नहीं है, you can just avoid.
Or how would one get their inflammation down, the CRP level? How would I get that down?
Depends on the cause. If it's a food trigger, then you want to. So for me specifically, I'll give you my example so people can relate better with examples. So I figured out, because of doing a carnivore diet, that I was sensitive to coconut and milk. Okay.
But वो तो है नहीं, coconut तो है नहीं carnivore diet में.
No, I'm saying it's because of that I figured out, because I eliminated it and then I added it back.
Right.
And I wasn't even doing milk on the carnivore diet. I was just doing red meat, organs,
Pure.
salt, pure carnivore, 1.5 months. No spices, nothing. Just like properly tried it, want to give it a shot. So when I've done keto and carnivore, my brain has skyrocketed, like mental health as well as focus, attention.
100%.
You know, and hunger pangs go away. So great for satiety, great for mental health. There are other things also which it can help with, like the ketogenic diet is great. Don't get me wrong, like these diets have specific applications, and I myself recommend them to clients depending on the case. Like someone comes to me with epilepsy, okay, I will be giving that person a ketogenic diet. Someone comes to me with cancer, I will be putting him
Epilepsy
on
और
in
ketogenic
ketosis.
diet का क्या link है?
This is like the most known thing that ketogenic diet started for children with epileptic seizures. Ketogenic diets are one of the most effective thing to lower epileptic seizures.
What are epileptic
people-
seizures caused by?
There's various causes. So there are hormonal imbalances, there's various nutrient deficiencies, there's infections. Again, like, so all disease processes are multifactorial, and it's never like, it's rarely one thing. It's a combination of a genetic predisposition combined with host factors, infections, toxins, all of that like comes together to create a perfect storm, kind of. So for epilepsy, like, the reason why the medical community stopped using ketogenic diets because they came up with epileptic drugs, right? But before effective epileptic drugs were developed, ketogenic diet was like standard practice. But so as I was saying, like if someone comes to me with cancer, I'm going to recommend a ketogenic diet for them because there's some good. It's still like early. The research hasn't matured that much, but there's good early research to show that it can have great value in terms of even mechanistically it jives, even in terms of outcomes data. There is some evidence to rest, like it's good. There are researchers looking into it. They've done trials where they've used keto and like fasting along with traditional cancer therapies, improved the outcomes, reduced side effects. So everything has a time and place, right? So earlier I used to be someone who's like a hardcore vegan and think all animal foods are bad. I was like deep down that rabbit hole. Then I came out of that. When I went down to ketogenic diet rabbit hole, then I was like all vegans are choots, and like plant-based diet can never be healthy. Carnivore mein aur bhi worse ho gaya, entire like tribalism and just
shout out Summer.
So yeah, like heavily like I've had phases where I've totally like anti-meat, and I've had phases where I'm like totally anti-plant. And my own experiences, like going deeper into diagnostics, just like testing. And it's one thing when you're reading stuff and watching videos. It's another thing when you're seeing patients and you have like people are
100%.
walking in and you're seeing in real time, like, dude, I gave this one dude this supplement, he's thriving, and this other person told me like they started having like hair fall or something after taking it. So like you get to see how unique and bio-individual every single person is. I see this all the time in my treatment protocols also. So someone comes to me for same condition. I've given people this example. So I've had people who've come to me for acne as well. One person's acne can be because of a vitamin A deficiency, a zinc deficiency, omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. These are all things which are known to trigger acne. But it's not just these. There's an infectious component to acne also, like mold can cause acne. H. pylori, parasites, all of these things have been studied in people who have acne. They have higher levels of these pathogens compared to controls who don't have acne. Okay, so we know these are all causes. So if you come to me with acne and I do your tests and I figure out like your acne is because you have androgen excess, you have too high testosterone, that's also a thing, by the way. Like, people assume that something's good, it's like zyada अच्छा है, vitamin D अच्छा है तो लगा लो 60K IU लगा लो रोज, like every week. This is common practice in medicine. Like doctors recommend 60,000 international units a week, which can have side effects.
तेरे side में doctor करते होंगे. I think in India, like typically the average doctor recommends too less of these supplements.
No. I've trust me, I've seen prescriptions. I've seen people who've gone to medical doctors come to me. Mostly everyone's getting 60K calcitriol.
20,000 IU की वो देते हैं शीशी मीठी वाली पीने के लिए.
वो भी ज़्यादा है. So I'll tell you, the ideal dose for vitamin D depends.
But that's for the week, bro. That's for the week.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So ideally, it's best to take something on a daily basis. Like this is the same thing with B12 injections, vitamin D, like high dose shots. Is that you can cause short-term toxicity. If you understand the mechanism of vitamin D, what it does, mainly it increases calcium absorption in the gut. If I dump vitamin D on your body today, they have done studies where they've seen high dose supplementation increasing urinary calcium. Okay, so oxalates and calcium as well. Like both of these things go up, especially calcium. Like when you have like high vitamin D levels, and this can increase the risk of developing soft tissue calcification. So you can land up developing calcium lodging in the wrong places. Like developing issues related to like having excess calcium deposited in different parts of the body, which can lead to heart attacks and strokes and stuff as well. Right. So there is too much of a good thing for everything. Whatever you take it, like magnesium le lo, everyone's like hailing magnesium. You cross 2.5 in your serum, you're gonna start getting like bad symptoms from having too much magnesium.
If I take a supplement of magnesium biglycinate once a night, that's
everything is dependent. So for anything you ask me, it depends on what your levels are and what dose you're taking.
So you're saying my Bible is blood work.
Yeah, man, and that changes for every person, right? Like if someone's coming to me with a vitamin D deficiency of like under 10, I'm going to give him like 5 to 10,000 IU to get him up and then put him on a maintenance dose. So ideally for vitamin D, I want the levels to be between 40 to 60. There are people who recommend that more is better, like 80 is better, 100 is better. But then we've seen that you have risk of, like calcification go up on high vitamin D. Even for things like amino acids, bro. Like there's branched chain amino acids taken a lot by the fitness industry. High levels of those can like make you develop insulin resistance.
BCAAs,
yes,
pre-workouts.
leucine, isoleucine. If you reach high levels in your serum, it will actually make you insulin resistant. So every single compound.
Oh, diabetic bodybuilders is a popular Venn diagram. Ho to rahi hai wo, hai na? Jo bilkul they do everything right and they still get diabetes.
Yeah, so a lot of the thing with the fitness industry is because they're not tracking biomarkers, a lot of people actually develop severe liver issues because of having excess ammonia. So BCAA is not only make you insulin resistant in high amounts, of course, like, in ideal amounts they do have benefits, which is why like tracking everything helps. But if you like cross it, then along with that you can also develop high ammonia levels. Ammonia is a proper neurotoxin. Okay, and those amino acids, if you're taking it, it generates high ammonia. It will go and cause alterations in consciousness, and it will put load on the liver to a point where because the liver has to clear ammonia. So you can land up developing it's both ways. Like high ammonia can cause a liver problem, and if you have a liver problem because you've damaged your liver from other causes, you'll end up developing high ammonia levels. And it's called hepatic encephalopathy, when people get brain issues because of like a liver problem. It's mainly driven by ammonia. So a lot of people in the fitness community who aren't tracking this, who are going like hardcore workouts, not giving time for recovery, excess overdosing on protein and amino acids and stuff, and just flying blind. I've had people who've come to work with me like that. And I've got like, bad liver profiles and like high ammonia levels, and their symptoms have like crazily resolved when I've, optimized those things. Even testosterone is a big problem. Like a lot of people don't know this, but in the fitness industry, half the people who take TRT develop acne. Like very clear research on that. So
I don't think India में लेते हैं लोग TRT इतना ज़्यादा.
I'm saying any form of testosterone boosting or replacement falls in the same category. So if you boost it way too much, again, like track your levels. Most people just
check this out. This is my okay. So for context, जब मैंने full-fledged Healthians की report कराई थी 2023 के नवंबर में, I don't know what the exact thing was. I got 433.
Okay.
That's all I know. 433. This is DHT. This is free testosterone. This is total testosterone.
Okay, let me tell you. For free testosterone, the ideal range is 15 to 25. You're at 6. Okay,
really?
So yeah, you can go higher.
मेरे को also, my friend Samo told me that this is a corrupted report. I should check. I'd be dead, no, if I would have.
No, but it makes sense, bro. Like you have slight body fat, even like just having slightly higher BMI and visceral fat and adiposity.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. So what happens is when you have any like body fat on.
But 6 पे तो मैं zero drive मर नहीं जाता मैं 6 पे.
It's not 6, bro. So the free is 6, but so there's a normal range and optimal again, right? So in the normal range, for your age group, if we see the normal range is somewhere around, it says 9 to 32. Okay, for like a male age. Okay, for your bracket. So even according to that, you're a bit suboptimal. Like even the normal range, like you're a bit off.
like it's way off. But I'm wondering like, how am I surviving, still doing my things?
Also, to have proper hypogonadism, you need to go lower. So proper hypogonadism get diagnosed when testosterone levels go under 300.
So अभी मेरा testosterone level कितना
You are at total testosterone at 480.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why you've not gone to proper hypogonadism category.
Yeah.
So that's why I said every single thing has a range. जितना deficient जाओगे उतने worse symptoms आएंगे.
तो 480
you go under 300, you will surely get hypogonadism symptoms. At this level, your insulin sensitivity is getting harmed. Your libido is like going to be more suboptimal than what it could have been.
Right.
Like if you were above 600, your gains and everything, like all of that's going to be suboptimal right now compared to what you could have been if you like got this.
So free testosterone कम है, but regular testosterone ठीक है? Is that what you're saying?
नहीं, even regular testosterone is low in my range. My range is 600 to 900.
Okay, yeah. That's what someone also told me. It's like get above 700 minimum.
Yeah. So the thing is, having just total low is one metric, but you want to look at total and free together. So it's good you've got this done because like you have scope for improvement. Now let me tell you some quick things. Like a lot of people are watching, they might also want to like improve the testosterone levels because T levels have been declining because of microplastics and endocrine disruptors and all the
receipts
things. Yeah, BPAs.
This is like the funniest thing, bro.
Yeah.
I was मैं समझ market गया कहता मैं रिसीट को हाथ नहीं लगाऊंगा. क्या हो गया यार? कह रहा नहीं लगाऊंगा.
But every little thing helps, man. Like,
I know.
avoiding that, plastic container, like avoiding the receipt, all of that adds up.
Man, like just the act of living is an act of rebellion itself.
I know.
Seeing all of that.
Especially when you're trying to be conscious and
so
truly take control of your own health.
So I'm definitely fat. I gained 10 kilos because of being completely sedentary the last year. I was at 433 general testosterone, I think, November, May. It's risen up a little bit, but not enough.
Yeah.
If I want to get above 800, what should I do?
Number one, reduce your BMI. So without even taking any supplement or doing anything else, just working out and getting lean is going to increase your testosterone. I'll tell you the mechanism. I was telling you this before as well.
और पढ़ लिया नीचे DHT भी है शायद.
Okay, my bad. DHT range also is, I think, 450 to 900 in my optimal range. So uska bhi you're sitting at 300. So even that you can optimize. The normal range is at 143. But you want to get above 450. You have scope for improving all these things.
Okay.
And I'll tell you some things which can help you get there.
So let's start with the first one. If I want to increase my testosterone levels from suboptimal to mega god tier, boner god, how do I do it?
You have to know the factors which are responsible for lowering testosterone and then optimize that. So first start with just fixing your BMI, reduce your body fat. Okay, so just making sure you get your BMI down and you
just lose the fat.
And I'll tell you why that helps so much is because when you have fat, it increases this enzyme aromatase, which converts testosterone to estrogen, right? So just by you having excess fat, like all the testosterone in your body is making, more of it is being converted to estrogen. If you solve that problem, the testosterone is going to be better than it is right now. Something you can do right off the bat. Strength training itself has been seen to boost testosterone. Just working out without doing anything, just exercise and strength training has been shown to boost it. Those are two things. Optimizing vitamin D levels is super important. Vitamin D, again in the literature, is very clear. You optimize vitamin D levels, you're going to improve your testosterone. Zinc deficiency is a huge one. And this is another problem. When you do a zinc test, you will show fine in the report. I think if the range is above 50, if you're above 50, you'll show fine. But my optimal range is 90 to 120. Okay, and again, that's based on research where that spot has the most benefits on a large number of people for preventing and optimizing all the functions of zinc. Okay, so that's another thing. A lot of these things I'm saying optimize. You might go and do a test and you might think, okay, normal range ke upar, and just keep it at the back of your head that there are actual optimal ranges. Okay, which are higher than what you might need to get to. So optimize your vitamin D, optimize your zinc. Zinc is a very, very important thing for optimizing testosterone. In terms of nutrients, there's many aromatase inhibitors. So low-hanging fruit have pomegranate juice. Okay, it has epigallocatechin, which is a specific polyphenol which has been shown to block aromatase, and there's clinical trials on pomegranate juice where they've increased testosterone by I think 20% plus. Okay,
and what's
by
the
500 ml pomegranate
frequency?
Juice daily.
Frequency daily.
For I think the trial lasted 2 to 3 months. I can send you all these papers if you want later on, but I have references for exact interventions. I'm telling you, there's clinical trials where optimizing these things.
I love it. Yeah.
There's massive research on DHEAS. One thing you haven't got tested here is your DHEAS levels. So DHEA is a precursor to testosterone. This is a problem with a lot of online discourse because a lot of people watch videos even from influencers who are very credible, and sometimes even they get things wrong. I was watching this last night. I was watching this video from Dr. Peter Attia. He's someone I really respect. He changed my views a lot on LDL and lipids and stuff. So during his take on DHEA, and to be he was honest, he's saying I reviewed the literature 10 years back, and that time there was no strong evidence on that. But in the last couple of years, there's this 2020 meta-analysis which looked at multiple trials. Meta-analysis are one of the highest forms of research because that's where they collect all of the trials which have been done and then see if the effect still stands. Do all of them show a cumulative effect? So even that trial found that DHEA supplementation for men is a very, very effective way to boost.
कहाँ से मिलेगा मेरे को?
It's a supplement. It's
just
over-the-counter supplement, banned in certain countries, but we do get it out here.
Yeah.
So and of course it can backfire. People take too much DHEA and then they get acne. So you can boost your androgens too much as well. That's the thing. So you want to hit the right dose, and the right dosing is ideally with your functional medicine practitioner or with a nutritionist who's delved into functional medicine. They know the dosing.
There's no rough ballpark that you can give.
Everything is personalized and customized, bro. That's what I'm saying. Everything changes on the extent of the deficiency, and then I have to decide how much. Sometimes deficiencies are fixable through food. Because you might have a mild deficiency. I was if you have a mild zinc deficiency, I just focus on eating more red meat. And
so what's more ways? Or kya? DHA. So far you said to increase testosterone levels naturally.
Vitamin D, zinc, DHEA, and losing weight and strength training.
Just and do pomegranate juice.
pomegranate juice as well. Stopping to masturbate for a while. That doesn't have clinical research. It has clinical research only on the 7th day of abstinence.
So, I have
so
something to say
if you
about that.
abstain, on the 7th day, your T is going to bump. And there is some research to show that androgen receptor sensitivity increases when you do NoFap.
Agreed. Anecdotal. A mutual friend someone told me if you masturbate too much, you get zinc loss.
Yes, that's very true. That's 100% accurate. He's right.
ठीक है, zinc loss होता है. Number one. Number two, I've been speaking to a urologist to get on the podcast forever. वो फरीदाबाद बेस्ड तो वो figure out नहीं हो पाया. But I was like, क्या बातें कर सकते हैं? He said that the NoFap movement is a fad. It's stupid. You want your sperms motile. You want them in constant refreshment. इसलिए आप दबा के करो. You know, you should jack off. And Dave Asprey has this whole like equation that he's made कि क्या आपकी age है divided by.
I'm referring to that only.
Okay.
That's 70 thing I was telling you about. For most people it comes, and then with your age it changes as well. The frequency drops.
I remember reading it at 22 or 21. It was 4 days. It's increased now, 27 now.
Okay.
So, but वही मैं पूछ रहा हूँ कि why not frequently fap?
So that's why I cited the research. So we know that there is a good amount of zinc loss, and I told you like there's proper research on zinc deficiency causing, like low testosterone. That's one. Second is they've actually done the studies where they've made people like abstain and then measure the testosterone levels. So 7 days after abstinence, there's a huge peak in testosterone, which then like kind of comes back down.
I see.
But there is like
a pump over there.
Yeah, and then there is some mechanistic research. It's not clinical trials, but it's mechanistic research in cell lines and stuff, which shows that androgen receptor sensitivity does get better when you do
But is this a deal breaker?
That's why I'm saying this is low-hanging fruit. This is something I'm not totally convinced, but I've seen it. I've applied it on myself.
But hierarchy जो तूने बताई है, where does this land in the hierarchy of the things you've told me?
Very low. I would say not as low because there is good research on zinc, and we know like zinc is being lost. But for the effect I told you on the testosterone, that's a bump at the 7th day, which comes back down as well. Right. So that's something. Other than that, there is more research we have on other compounds. Ashwagandha is one. So I wanted to talk about this because this is an herb that's been massively demonized by a couple of people who've gained popularity on the online.
जैसे कि liver dog.
Yes. Finally.
Controversy.
Get to the fucking liver dog part. So man, that guy spread so much misinformation. It's not even funny.
वो तेरे ऊपर थर्ड लिख देगा कि ये alternative alien worshipping independent researchers मुझे नहीं बता सकते. And I have emailed with the guy. We tried to get him on the podcast. It didn't happen.
No, dude, this has already happened.
क्या?
I'm surprised you're saying this.
What?
This exactly this thing happened. So
what?
I don't.
Okay.
Wait for this. So this dude comes up with all these compounds which I'm using daily in my practice. I know the clinical trials behind it left, right, and center. The top of my head, And he's like, biotin doesn't work for this, and zinc doesn't work for that, and there's no evidence for vitamin D beyond preventing rickets and stuff. And I'm like, I've gone and he's like, yoga doesn't work for weight loss, all this, and many more claims. Some of his claims were accurate. The research isn't there. But then he throws the baby out with the bathwater because he has a bias. So he's heavily biased against nutraceuticals, supplements, herbs. You see it. I'm not even making this up. You see how the guy talks and presents himself.
And I think he gets the low hanging fruit in Ayush because Ayush वाले कभी उल्टा बोलेंगे नहीं. बोल नहीं सकते, वो सिर्फ आपको जेल में डाल सकते हैं.
No, the thing is he strikes some things very accurately, which the natural health community doesn't want to address. There are herbs which actually cause liver injury, but it doesn't make them all bad because they can. I'll give you an example for ashwagandha only. So ashwagandha in the clinical trials, a liver doc says ashwagandha is a liver poison. He says curcumin is a liver poison. He says green tea extract is a liver poison. I was watching the interview today morning only, so it's fresh off my head. Okay, so I knew this was gonna come up, so I was like, let me just refresh my memory. Yeah, so I'll tell you some of his claims. He says detoxification is a fad, doesn't have any basis in science.
Yeah, many people say that though. I spoke with Krish Ashok of Masala Lab. He said the same thing, that detox is bullshit. Your body detoxes itself naturally. That's what he said.
Let me tell you where they strike right and strike wrong. Okay, for all of these things, I'll first take their side and tell what they're getting right. Let's take the example of ashwagandha. So for ashwagandha in the clinical trials, right? If you just go and listen to liver doc and hierarchy of evidence, he'll always say we want actual human clinical trials and meta-analysis. That's how we develop our take on scientific matters. The actual human clinical trials on ashwagandha, many of them have been done for testosterone, for stress reduction, for lowering cortisol, for improving insulin sensitivity. We have the data on ashwagandha and it's quite promising. Those trials are, okay, you can argue that there are a couple of hundred people and there's still few trials and stuff, but we have the trials and they're showing great effects on these metrics. So this dude comes out and says that ashwagandha is a liver poison when all the clinical trials they've measured ALT, AST levels and we've not seen any increase in those trials. Right? So in those trials itself, in a well-controlled environment, ashwagandha didn't cause any liver injury. But now this is the problem in scientific matters. Something cannot be noticed in a small trial, but when you roll it out and like lakhs and millions of people take it.
Like with the vaccines.
Yeah, same thing with the vaccines. You might have some people who have some unique genetic things where they're more susceptible to accumulating ashwagandha, which is why it's causing liver issues. So to take things like that and then demonize them and say ashwagandha doesn't, like, it's always a liver poison and doesn't have any effects. That's just like totally misleading people with that kind of large audience. Ashwagandha does have efficacy. If you hold it to the same standard of wanting clinical trials in medicine, ashwagandha has many clinical trials. I was listening to this morning. He says curcumin is like, all this whole Indian culture about sprinkling curcumin and turmeric on our, food. That's totally like, it's fine as a culinary practice. Doesn't have any medical benefit. That is so wrong, man. Like there's tons and tons of, there's actually
turmeric ko log
let
bolte
me
hain.
say this. There's proper meta-analysis. These are at least 10 to 20 trials which have happened on curcumin for liver injury, like to see if they help improve the liver or not. These meta-analysis showed the opposite. They showed curcumin actually drops liver enzymes. And this dude is out saying curcumin is a liver poison. Like he doesn't, and he uses the
Drops
science.
liver enzymes.
So AST and ALT are intracellular enzymes, okay, which are mainly concentrated in the liver. Whenever you take something which damages the liver, these enzymes leak out in the blood. You do a blood test, you'll see them go up. Okay, and the trials on curcumin show that these are meta-analysis again, like highest quality evidence, multiple trials, researchers analyzing all the trials together and seeing where the evidence goes. According to that, they saw that the AST-ALT levels dropped after taking curcumin. If his logic was right, that it's worsening the liver, you would see an increase in those trials for ashwagandha and for curcumin. But we don't see those. Where we see those is in large-scale rollouts, okay, where tons of people are taking it. So yeah, an argument could be made that okay, curcumin is safe for people in these trials because they're testing it on a small number of people. But when maybe the side effects of causing liver injury are 150,000, 1 lakh, so you can't figure out from the trial, which is a fair argument. But that same thing exists for vaccine science also. That same thing exists for pharmaceutical medications also. So why use it to like selectively outcast like one type of practicing medicine and healing people, and then not apply it to your own field? Right? Because you could make the same argument for drug trial, like SSRIs, antibiotics, crocin. They don't cause liver injury in everyone, but they cause it in a certain subset of people. Now, because of that, are you going to start saying like, don't take this, these are liver poisons? They have efficacy, like the crocin is helping you to reduce your fever. The antibiotics are helping you to get rid of the infection. But these are trade-offs in medicine. You're always making risk-benefit decisions like, okay, you take a compound, we know, okay, this is what I'm taking it for. If I take curcumin, if I have arthritis, I know curcumin is going to help with my joint pain. There's trials on that where they've used curcumin itself. I have high CRP levels, I take curcumin, I know those CRP levels are going to come down because curcumin has a lot of anti-inflammatory activity and it's been shown in clinical trials to reduce CRP levels. Right? So I know that I'm taking it for a certain benefit, and when I'm doing this testing, I'm measuring my markers every month, and like people can do it every 3 months or so. It doesn't cost much, man. Like if you do just like the basic 60-70 markers, which itself will give you a lot of data, barely cost you like 3 to 4K in 3 months. I think that's not like high cost, and for the data you get, it helps you to track if whatever changes you're making for diet, for lifestyle, for supplements, if it's actually working or not. Because the trend I see in most influencers online, everyone's sitting and giving sermons and lectures about like, this thing helps for that, and this thing is an panacea or whatever. But what I rarely see is people applying it on themselves, showing objective data, and saying like, okay, this thing works for this. I applied it on myself, or I applied it in patients. Look at the before numbers, look at the after numbers, look at the symptoms, everything's improved. That's how we get some level of objectivity when we're discussing things in our circles. Otherwise, everything's an anecdote. Like, okay, I can say a vegan diet, like there's 500 anecdotes saying it's worked for them, but then there's 10,000 saying it didn't. You can find the same thing for carnivore, you can find the same thing for any medical practice.
Right.
So anecdotes always come with, you can't like selectively cherry pick which anecdotes you're listening to, because then you have to account for all of them, and you always have both on any side because everyone's different, man. That's what I've like realized. The more and more I keep studying this, every person's radically different. So ashwagandha, just like, wrapping the whole thing up, ashwagandha is something that can help you improve your testosterone. There are trials on that as well. So that's another thing you can add. Tribulus, more than Tribulus, Tongkat Ali. Tongkat Ali also has good research behind it showing that it boosts testosterone. I think even the mechanism behind Tribulus is suspected to be that it increases DHEA levels. But the thing when I think about nutraceuticals,
testosterone बढ़ाने से, does it also mean higher energy levels? Because there could be two different things, right?
So when we have boosted testosterone in clinical trials, they measure all the parameters. So in a clinical trial, if it's only boosted testosterone and it's not boosted muscle strength or performance, then they mention that, right?
What do you mean?
So in the trials itself, they measure the serum biomarkers, like, okay, we gave this, testosterone improved. Then they'll also measure the endpoints. Like, okay, if you're boosting testosterone, you want to see if it's improving strength or not in the gym, you know, if you have more. And from the top of my head, from the trial I'm referring to about ashwagandha, it did improve the strength as well in the trial.
नहीं, मेरे कहने का मतलब है कि energy levels, because I was reading this thread today, I was going to save it for today, मैं उसको लाना भूल गया. It was talking about how ATP is what causes more energy in the body, and how if you have a better metabolism, you have more energy.
So your mitochondrial cells are tasked with making ATP. There are many mitochondrial poisons and there are things which boost the mitochondria. So I have like a lot of experience applying this on myself, because I myself have struggled with chronic fatigue. For years, I told you, I sleep for 10-12 hours till wake up yawn 50 times throughout the day. Just,
I do sleep a lot, by the way.
So there are some potent mitochondrial substrates which can help you to boost your energy levels and improve your fatigue. Again, fatigue is a huge thing people are struggling with. So again, some low hanging fruit you can optimize there. Vitamin D levels have been seen to correlate with fatigue. CoQ10 levels, coenzyme Q10, that's another thing that supports the mitochondrial health a lot. Normalizing those levels have been seen to help with fatigue. L-carnitine is another thing that keto people need more of, because their body uses carnitine to shuttle long chain fatty acids. So carnitine deficiency causes fatigue. There's again, like, steroid hormone deficiency itself is like one of the symptoms of hypogonadism is having, like, fatigue. So boosting a testosterone is going to help, because we have the trials where boosting testosterone, taking TRT or taking testosterone boosters. No, for women the conversation around hormones is entirely different. So none of this should be applied to women altogether, because for men it's like your T levels start here in your youth and then they have a slow decline as you age. For women it's like roller coaster, and then suddenly like fall off a cliff.
Just like emotions.
And you hit menopause and everything is gone. Like you have no, like, very low estrogen, very low testosterone, very low progesterone. So approaching hormone replacement for women again is super important. I do recommend like bioidentical hormone replacement for women, or working with a practitioner who can do that through herbs and natural nutrients as well. Like there are herbs which also help women to boost their estradiol, boost their progesterone. Estrogen is something which is demonized a lot, in some circles, but
it's something that the body produces, bro. So
and it has great benefits for cardiovascular disease prevention, for bone density. It's very important for bone health. So trust me, like everything that we have spoken about, which different camps demonize, like, the vegans demonize red meat. There are reasons where red meat can backfire. I've seen this in a lot of people who have infections. Red meat gives a lot of iron, and that fuels their skin problems. Like a lot of people get acne worsening. I've seen it, like I've applied it on people. Even myself, like when I've taken iron supplements, I've landed up developing my acne, flare-ups, and my skin gets worse. Stop it, goes away. So there's tons of compounds within animal foods, and one important concept I want to discuss is the concept of nutrient density that all the animal-based community talks about, right? So the main narrative that is there in that community is that animal foods are the most bioavailable. Okay,
correct.
They come with
it's one of the strongest arguments that I've heard myself.
I'll give you some context on that, and it's true for certain things, but not for everything else. And sometimes having too much bioavailability can be a problem. Okay, so my main example I like to cite is iron, because it's so common. I've seen someone who's in my network, their father actually has a iron overload problem, and for that person, if I'm going to make him have red meat or put him on a carnivore diet, his neurodegeneration is going to get worse, his liver is going to get worse. High iron is a oxidant, like it creates hydroxyl free radicals which damages different cells and organs in the body. So very, very strong research on people who have hemochromatosis, having to like restrict red meat. If someone comes to me with already developed CKD, like I'm saying this because I literally saw like my first CKD patient one-on-one. Like I've dealt with CKD patients in the company. I was working in the past earlier, but I just dealt with a CKD case personally, totally delved into it deeply in order to develop protocols for him. Even in CKD, like if your kidneys are already messed up, why do they get messed up? They get messed up by years of high blood sugar and high blood pressure. Those are the two main causes. So if you're if you have metabolic issues for years, like high blood sugar, high blood pressure, that's one of the main reasons which damages your nephrons. And then giving added protein to a person like that, it adds burden, and they have to use their kidneys to filter out the excess uremic toxins which are generated. So there's a time and place for different conditions. There are tons of studies so firstly, like wrapping up this point about nutrient density, the thing is, a lot of times things in animal foods can become toxic. Not just iron, but even zinc. I've seen many people come to me who are eating large amount of animal foods who have zinc through the roof. And you might ask, like, zinc is so great, why is it a problem?
Testosterone बढ़ाएगा because you
No.
yourself said no.
That's the thing. Everything increases it if you get it from deficiency to optimal. But you can go from optimal to high and land up creating a whole new set of problems for yourself.
Right.
While you think you're helping yourself. I've seen this in people, like I dealt with one case of mental health disorders and acne and sebderm just like last 1.5 months back. He came to me with like very high zinc levels, not supplementing, just having like a lot of animal foods in his diet. And
घर के बाहर के?
घर के. So mostly like our vibe, like eating organic and apne zone mein pura, like trying to be clean and have a good lifestyle and stuff and eat clean. So the issue is when your zinc goes above 110, your risk of heart disease and stroke rises by a certain percentage by every 10 points. Okay, so they have done this kind of research where they've seen the higher the zinc goes above 110, okay, like itna wo badhte jata hai, like your stroke risk keeps going up. Like zinc is independent risk factor for stroke. Okay, if you take like a lot of people take high dose zinc, COVID ke time mein kafi hua. So that itself is known to suppress the immune system, tank your sex hormones. There's tons of things which you might be taking high dose zinc, not testing your levels, thinking you're benefiting yourself. I see this way too often. Like I tested one of my friends like sometime last year, and he didn't disclose to me that he was taking high dose vitamin D every week. He is like, COVID ke time mein sab bol rahe the vitamin D to le raha. And I see his blood report, his levels are like some 75, 80 or something. I'm like, bro, you're going to get like issues with calcification in your heart and other places if these levels keep staying this high. And he's like, मैं तो vitamin D नहीं ले रहा. And then sometime later he's like, bro, I didn't tell you, but I was taking vitamin D on my own itna, and that's a fact. And I didn't know like itna सोचना पड़ता.
Right, that's not something to be ashamed of. Vitamin D.
No, he's like, मुझे पता नहीं था इतना सोचना पड़ता है ये सब चीजों के बारे में. He's like, people have this perception that over-the-counter supplements are safe. ऐसे ही ले सकते हो without tracking, testing.
Yeah.
And that's a place where Liverdoc and people like that do have a certain point they're making, that natural things can be harmful. The problem is that then they just dismiss any fucking benefit from natural things and totally take the side of pharmaceuticals. The detox thing is another example. I'll speak about that. So evidence-based detoxification is possible. It's not like you just have your normal processes for detox and there's nothing that you can decrease or increase which will improve that. Okay, so there are specific compounds. Funnily enough, curcumin itself, when sprinkled as a spice, has been shown to upregulate phase 1 and phase 3 detox pathways. So if you just think about detoxification, there are different organs which are involved in detoxification. It's not just the liver. Your skin, your testicles, your kidneys and your liver all have cells which can biotransform compounds, like take them from fat soluble to water soluble, and then finally put them in a form where they can get excreted in your blood, in your sweat or urine, or feces. So there are specific things which you can increase which help to boost detoxification. Like, let me give an example. Let's say you get your amino acids testing done and your cysteine and methionine and glycine levels are low. Okay, this happens in people who are even having protein because they might have issues in the digestive tract which are stopping them from absorbing protein, or they might have unique genetic things which make them need more of those amino acids. If those things are low in that person and I optimize his glycine levels, I optimize his methionine, just looking at the literature itself, that is going to help in boosting, because those compounds are needed for detoxification to work. If someone has high oxidative stress and they have low glutathione levels, glutathione is needed in the phase 2 detoxification process. So detoxification is a very well studied science, and there are things which have been studied which are known to boost it. Like St. John's wort is known to boost phase 3 pathway. So in terms of the phases of detox, phase 0 is when the toxin enters the cell. Phase 1 is when it converts from fat soluble to water soluble. Phase 2 is when some molecule is attached to it to make it less reactive, otherwise it will cause damage in the cell. Phase 3 is when it exits the cells and then it can leave your body in your feces or your sweat or urine. These are the phases of detox. Most of them are stored in your fat tissue. You go on any kind of weight loss program, you're going to liberate these toxins. They're going to have to go to your organs of detoxification. They'll pass through these pathways and then they have to exit your body, which is why sweating has been seen to...
This is the process of a toxin and entering your body. That's what you're saying.
Toxins are stored in the fat, and then the process I described is how they go from fat soluble to water soluble, because a toxin has to be converted from a fat soluble compound to a water soluble. There are many water soluble
and then what happens?
For it to get excreted.
I see. That's the detox process taking place.
Yeah. So in the gut, you have something called bile, like your gallbladder releases bile, and then that helps you to absorb fats and fat soluble vitamins. It also helps to in the excretion of these toxins. because the toxins like again latch onto bile and then the bile has to be excreted. So there are things you can do to increase the excretion of your bile acids. Okay, like taking certain binders and different strategies which can help to boost your detox. Because you're like draining your bile, your liver has to make new bile. Otherwise, bile, this is known in the science on detoxification, like bile tends to recirculate. So same bile that gets made along with the toxins, it'll keep recirculating 17, 18 times. So even if something like your liver has worked hard, transform the toxin, it's landed up in the gut, your bile like latches onto it to remove it, it's going to like circulate again and again and again. And in that process, it can go back and just like get converted to being a fat soluble toxin, and then again it has to go through the same process. So there are things we can do to like enhance bile acid excretion. Sometimes these toxins get converted and land up in the gut. There you can take things like activated charcoal and other binders which have been shown to increase excretion. Like there's tons of studies done on charcoal, different nutrients which help to increase detoxification. This is like, I don't know what these guys are talking about. They're not reading the literature, because I'm reading this stuff every day and like the trials are so clear. Like you take this, they're measuring like even probiotics. I'll even tell you the specific strains, Lactobacillus plantarum and Lactobacillus rhamnosus. Both of these have been shown to actually go to the gut when you take them, and it like binds to toxins. Okay, like the research is so clear. I don't
binds
know.
to toxins, thereby it's easier to eliminate it.
And then they can get excreted. Yeah, like there's literature on
That's
like
the
probiotics.
mechanism.
Yeah,
That's what probiotics do. जब तुम्हारी gut health ठीक हो रही होती है, it's actually taking the toxins together.
No. That's one mechanism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
It
that's
has
why
other functions
everything,
as well.
like every compound always has multiple mechanisms through which it's rarely one. Right. So whenever you hear me talk about, okay, like let's say vitamin D helps in cancer prevention or helps in bone density. So one mechanism for bone density is that it helps to absorb calcium in the gut, which will help. But there are other mechanisms also. So that's the thing. Like for any compound I mentioned, always multiple things in which it's working. But point being that there are compounds, there are amino acids you can boost. There are certain antioxidant factors like glutathione, methylation. You can supply a body with excess methyl groups. That can
Methylene blue?
Methylene blue is different. That's something biohackers take. That has some early studies showing cognitive
अभी
benefits.
कुछ आया ही नहीं methylene blue के ऊपर. I was also looking it up. There's not much.
No, I was reading the research on this just today morning. I somehow knew like these things are going to come up. So I was like,
नहीं तुझे कैसे पता यार?
आता है intuition or like just the feel of like what
No,
topics
only
to come. If
because
we
of-
delve into this, that these are like the common things people are thinking about.
Look, my friend who does it close. I have my roommate now who's also deep into this. He told me about VO2 max. उससे पहले मैं Ben Greenfield की किताब पे पढ़ा था, but I was nowhere near close to Ben Greenfield's extravagant biohacking at all when I first read it. So methylene blue मेरे को incidentally समर नहीं बताया था. He's like, I'm experimenting with it just to see what happens. So, but tell me something to dial things back. Health is a very comprehensive subject. I think what I've taken from this conversation at least is कि bro, blood work is everything, and not just randomized healthians mega package blood work.
Someone who knows what they're doing, someone who knows what markers to test for, their clinical significance. अगर low है उसको कैसे improve करना है, अगर low है या high है, what does it mean, what are the causes, how to then, so for every marker that is off, there are 10 to 15 possible causes. I need to rule those out and rule things in. Like let's say for example hemoglobin. People assume iron deficiency lowers hemoglobin, but you know what else does? Vitamin A deficiency, B12 deficiency, folate, zinc, vitamin E, vitamin C, selenium. Not kidding. Like all of these have published literature behind them. When you fix a selenium deficiency, hemoglobin improves. When you fix a zinc deficiency, hemoglobin improves. They've done trials with zinc where they've given zinc with iron and it's helped to improve the anemia compared to just standalone iron. So there's many things which are impacting every marker. Now for hemoglobin, if you come to me with low levels, I have 15 different possibilities. You could have iron, but it could also be all of these things. It could be that you have H. pylori infection. That's been shown to lower hemoglobin levels. There's tons, So I have been trained in order to rule in and rule out, do differential diagnosis. Then I will, like it takes hours of work. Like every client who comes to me, I spend like 6 to 7 hours studying their blood work, like, eliminating all the things that don't apply to them. Like let's say for example, hemoglobin में अभी ये 10 cause है. उसमें से अभी zinc deficiency आया. But I can look in your lab test and see zinc is normal. So that's out of the way. I know your zinc is normal, it's not causing your low hemoglobin. Next, iron. I can look at ferritin, I can look at TIBC and see, okay, your iron sufficient. Iron is not playing a role. Next. ऐसे करके I have to do this. You understand? For one marker, it's like 10, 15. I have to do this for 135 markers. Like that. So this is why most people are doing it wrong. Like they go in for a marker and they have this rudimentary understanding that if you're measuring potassium, it's for potassium. If you're measuring iron, it's for iron.
मैंने तो अपने experience में देखा है, even with doctors, they will either prescribe you a regular multivitamin or they'll give you one supplement to fix. They always treat it. they always treat it like ये एक single दिक्कत आ रही है, इसका एक single इलाज है. So where can people find this kind of work? कोई resources online that they can study? Do you do this yourself? Because I know you just started your practice right now.
So, anyone struggling with chronic health issues, I have a practice, so you can come work with me directly. There's an entire network of people.
वो कहाँ है तेरा lab coat? You should be more desperate, no?
I'll get it next time, bro. So that's one. Second is, in the next couple of months, I'm going to be launching my own courses, beginner, intermediate, advanced, taking people into like understanding biomarkers. So we just spoke about blood testing today, but it gets so deep, man. You can go and test your microbiome. We kind of spoke about this a little bit when we we're talking earlier as well. You can test your organic acids, amino acids, and your genetics. So the kind of worst, I've seen some people with very bad symptoms and chronic diseases, and in those kind of cases, I recommend people run everything. So it's like
genetic predisposition मैं कैसे टेस्ट कर सकता हूँ इंडिया के अंदर? Because like I said, podcast से पहले तेरे को बोल रहा था कि भाई I remember USA के अंदर जाके देखना, वो मेरे रूममेट्स जो थे वो साले बोलते थे मैं 23% स्कैंडिनेवियन हूँ, एक इंडियन लड़की ने कराया 100% साउथ एशियन आया. अब क्या करोगे बहनचो, वो जो जीनोम है ही नहीं.
नहीं, so this you're talking about ancestry. Here I'm talking about specific single nucleotide polymorphisms. Okay, these are mutations in certain genes that we have, which increase your risk for certain outcome. So, for example, if you have high, there's APOE, I think I was telling you about.
Where can I get these tested?
So I have got tie-up done with a company called Self Decode, who I've like been a fan of for 2 years. So we are offering these tests in India. I can share the link with you, and if anyone.
I can put it up, but I also want to do it myself.
For sure.
Self Decode.
Selfdecode.com. So it's a very, very powerful platform. I've interviewed the founder of that as well. Did a podcast with him. So that platform allows you to do your entire genetics, and they do genetics different from every single genetic company out there. So what they're doing is they've invested millions to develop like this place where they can develop these large AI-based risk assessment based on multiple genes for one outcome. So the example for this is if you have increased risk of Alzheimer's, like let's say आपके family में Alzheimer's has been running and you're concerned and you want to like see which genes are involved, you might do a APOE test to see what copies you got from your parents. Okay, so APOE 4, 2 copies of that, highest risk of Alzheimer's. APOE 2, okay, 2 copies, lowest risk, and then APOE 3 is moderate risk. So you can, but that's just one gene. There are like hundreds and thousands affecting Alzheimer's disease risk. So what these self-decode people have done is, because they've invested millions in the platform, they have some of the smartest PhDs in this space on the planet.
Indian company है?
नहीं,
बाहर की है.
Israeli company है. And
India में करती है पर ये?
Yeah, because we got a tie-up with them. So we are making this available to like, we've got tie-ups with all labs from abroad doing gut microbiome testing, doing organic acids, amino acids, genetics, like all of that legwork has been done by me and a couple of others over the years. So all of this stuff is available in India, but I typically recommend to people, पहले basic चीजें ठीक कर लो, like fix your diet, eat clean, eat organic, just sleep at the right time, get sunlight has many benefits, work out, just manage your mindset, meditate, it's like low-hanging fruit, get all that done before you go for the fancy stuff. Then start with blood work, like work with someone, like, or just like learn this yourself, do my course or explore other resources, tons of people online. The thing is, I acquired this knowledge by paying thousands of dollars in like
and almost losing your mind.
And deep personal issues, like I was saying, like my cystic acne, sebderm, all these chronic issues, and these were things I couldn't live with because it would show to everyone I'm going interacting with. So that push is always, the pressure is always there, like take kar lo because it's impacting my day-to-day life. Can't go and do a podcast when I want. Have to think I fucking apply aloe vera on my face 50 times before I'm going, and
really
that bad. So that all pushed me to like really fix myself, because I've tried everything under the sun. I've like been down the quantum biology rabbit hole, got sunlight every day, did grounding.
And I think the worst
tried all diets.
The worst probably is when there is a community that says just manage it and live it. जब मैं online search करता हूँ ना, how to live with XYZ disease, and like specifically bone pain, how to manage pain. With TMJ also, how to manage. Met this dude recently, he's like, there is no management. There is cure, period. और हम वहाँ जा सकते हैं, barring a few completely chronic.
Yes.
It's like, so don't even think about
exceptions,
that.
but for large number of things, cures are possible.
And
you can reverse the entire trajectory drastically to a point where, what I mean by cure is, I say you can improve your biomarkers drastically and you can improve your symptoms by crazy percentage.
You can also reverse diabetes.
Like you can definitely reverse diabetes. When I say reverse, like you're taking your, so when people say reverse, it's implied as cure. So it's not. The thing is, you have to understand the causes for any condition to think about if you can cure it or not. What is diabetes caused by? Okay, so there are many theories and scientific studies published on the causes of diabetes. Main one are thought to be hyperlipidemia, like fat accumulation inside the cell, chronic inflammation, and steroids as well, like cortisol, like high cortisol. They're some of the primary causes. There are more as well. Okay, and of course, like everything we do from sedentary lifestyle, excess calorie intake, all of that, adds up, and then over time you land up like chromium deficiencies, tons of things involved. So you can take all of that in the reverse direction. That's what I mean when I say reverse, or like
I see.
Like अगर आपका HbA1c 7 है, आपका insulin is like about 25. I have worked with people and I have helped to like drop those down crazily. I'll be sharing some of these testimonials because it's just been a couple of months since I started my practice. I'm about to get the testimonials and the before after of the people I'm working with. So I'll be sharing some crazy data of all the people who come to work and the what improvements they're seeing with objective markers and symptomatic improvements. It's possible to do this for a wide range of diseases without using a single allopathic drug.
So where can people follow you and find your work?
Best
Yohan
place
Tengra.
is at Tengra on Instagram, so I'm the most active. I also have a YouTube channel by my name. You can go there. I'll be sharing
दूसरा
some.
वाला तो बंद हो गया.
वो तो निकाल दिया, but then yeah, never give up.
Okay.
Always keep going, keep this.
I will say, क्योंकि अब podcast का end आ गया, तेरी थोड़ी तारीफ कर देता हूँ जो मैंने वैसे करी थी. I think you don't realize तेरे साथ जो चीजें हुई है ना, उसकी वजह से who you are becoming, no? You're impacting far more lives. The first time I met you, I did not know that you could exist on the lines that you exist and still live a life where you can communicate those things. Those are in the conspiracy realm mostly.
Yeah.
Now the switch to health. I showed you my blood markers. I think immediately afterward, I have learned that what you're championing around blood work, ये चीज आगे जाके ना hopefully default बन जाएगी. Because यार, there are so many people in my life who misdiagnose themselves and randomly diagnose themselves. And doctors also treat single causes. So hopefully people can be helped with that. And
that's a vision, man. That's like I really have high bars for where I have influence on a large number of people who are seeing patients as well. Because a lot of people, like they're in my network and they've learned from me in prior courses I've done. And so I'm just trying to influence all of the people through content as well as like the direct people I'm working with who are impacting clients and putting high bars for safety as well as efficacy. Everything natural though, nothing. We can't prescribe pharmaceuticals, so everything has to be like, all of the things that we spoke about.
Let's hope you're around and the aliens don't abduct you. I would still like my blood work reviewed.
100%.
ठीक है. Thank you guys. This was Yohan Tengra of formerly Anarchy for Freedom Foundation, Anarchy for Freedom India, and now just Yohan Tengra, the biohacker. And Yohan Tengra, my friend. See you all on the next episode of Dostcast. Don't forget to subscribe. और हाँ, एक छोटी सी announcement intro भी कर दी थी कि we are shutting the show down now for about 2 weeks while I build a new studio. And we're going to be back very, very shortly. This is Dostcast. See you all whenever I can. Bye-bye.